This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of what if Kid Naruto paid the ultimate price to save his family. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
The Konohagakure. As he and his men traversed Konoha, Iroh frowned. His entire army was currently marching through Konoha, with 6 fire guardians encircling him. He was now on his way to the cage tower. Both he and his guardians frowned at what they saw as he did so. Even with a few shinobi, the people of Konoha were either having a good time or going out to bars to drink as much as they wanted. It was made worse by the fact that all of the bastards had items that looked like Naruto, Mito, or Kyuubi. While chanting a song, they witnessed a group of civilians burning these items. In fact, they even noticed some spitting on the 3's photos or models. Iroh was furious. He was now absolutely certain that he was going to send Konoha to hell in one piece. He had no intention of destroying it. However, he was going to give the shinobi and its people the much-needed kick in the ass. The man may be Hiruzen's son, but he had always hated the way his father did things. Even when he himself had made friends with Naruto and first met Mito when she was only 3, he had warmed up to them and become something of an uncle figure to Mito and a brother figure to Naruto. It sickens me to see how Konoha turned out, Tu said, adding that she had received agreements from the others, including Asuma. Yes, that's right, Konoha has fallen from where it stood long ago, Iroh said, nodding and ignoring the shocked looks they were all receiving from the public. Tu grunted as she spoke. PFTT, they fell. Iroh. Sama, really hard, she remarked. Before they arrived at the cage tower, he nodded in agreement. Then he turned around and said, Men? He gave them all a resounding nod before they marched off to follow his instructions. Go surround the village, everything from the walls to the Hokage monument. I want every inch of this village surrounded so no one tries to leave. Iroh then turned to face the shinobi and citizens in the area and said, Now, Konoha's citizens and shinobi, I'm just going to give you one warning. Bring me Hiruzen Sarutobi in 10 seconds or I'll burn Konoha to the ground. Now, move or I'll carry out what I just said. Iroh ordered. The shinobi rushed to the Hokage's mansion in response to this. Then Iroh turned to face Tu and said, Tu-san, I want you and Chiriku to bring me those that are close to Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Go. His voice reverberated over the lethal silence of the crowd. He said. Hello. They all uttered the same words before vanishing in a shushin. Some people became terrified when they heard Naruto's name, looking around in fear that the Namikaze would attack and murder them. Knowing what had happened to the man who had developed a fearsome reputation in Konoha, others grinned. Hiruzen Sarutobi and his teammates appeared at precisely 9 seconds. They glanced ahead to see Iroh's sharp brown eyes on their forms. Suddenly, for some reason, they went pale. Once my elites return here, we can start. Until then, if you even move Hiruzen Sarutobi or your teammates, I will have you killed, Iroh said in a menacing tone that made good on his promise. When their leader was threatened by someone higher up than their Hokage, the shinobi became tense. Hiruzen scowled at this and followed his instructions. Yugo, Anko, Hana, Kurenai, the clan heads, Tuchi and Ayame Ichiraku, and finally Sasuke arrived 3 minutes after Tu and Chiriku did. The former was sufficiently awake to be present despite appearing extremely exhausted and dressed in a hospital gown. Hiruzen gritted his teeth in annoyance as they discovered Sasuke. He wanted to reach the boy and either kill him or turn him into a Konoha loyalist. He noticed Iroh nodding at the people Naruto was near when he looked back up. Now that everyone is present, I will be speaking. If anyone interrupts me, it will result in immediate death without any questions. Do you understand? He spoke in a commanding voice that poured out of him like a torrent. While some were genuinely hesitant to do so, they all nodded without hesitation. He waved it off because he didn't care what they thought, but he said, Good, at least I can see some of you Konoha aren't as stupid as I thought you'd be. The reason I'm here is because, as you can see, I've learned something fascinating from a friend, and based on what I've heard, some of you believe you can discredit my authority. His eyes lingered on Sarutobi and his teammates as he spoke. My good friend Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze had to leave Konoha with his sister Mito Uzumaki Namikaze, as you can see from what I've discovered. Why'd I say this? It's because Mito has been protecting her while several of you have been trying to kill him for years. This resulted in Naruto, the now ex Enbu Sotecho, abandoning Konoha and turning into a missing nin, he said, glaring at Hiruzen. The fact that the demon and its demonic guardian were permanently gone made some of the villagers act a little arrogant. The heads of the clan, Naruto's former squad, and the Ichiraku, however, tremble with grief and rage. When Naruto and Mito vanished, they received letters from him. They were aware of what transpired and what Hiruzen and his teammates chose to do because they had read about it. The danger to Mito's life and the Uchiha clan's massacre order. Additionally, it claimed that he assisted Itachi in eliminating the actual usurpers, claiming that they had spared innocent people who were unaware of the coup. Sasuke gazed at the ground with sorrow. He always admired Naruto, just like Itachi, and Naruto served as a wonderful example for him up until the massacre, when it was reported that Naruto had been seen assisting Itachi in killing the clan. Sasuke had always aspired to be as strong as Itachi and Naruto, two of Konoha's most revered shinobi. That was something else he always considered. What did Itachi mean that evening when he claimed to be defending those who were significant to him? Sasuke didn't believe the rumor that Naruto had been sighted, but he couldn't help but assume it was true because Naruto and Itachi were best friends. He added that he left Konoha during the night. Sincerely, he admitted to me that he had assisted in the now documented Uchiha massacre. However, only I and one Itachi Uchiha are aware of his motivations. Except for those who were close to Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, I'm here to warn you about Konoha as a whole. That I will personally burn Konoha to the ground if Naruto or Mito suffer any harm. You are a shinobi village, and I have allowed you all to rot in your own hell because you believe you are unbeatable. I've given you too short a leash since the 3 shinobi wars, and your actions have resulted in the death of one of the best men I've ever known, as well as the extinction of an innocent girl and one clan. He said, I'm going to chastise you all, Konoha. Following his statement, he surveyed the crowd and observed a range of responses, some resulting from rage, hatred, or anger. Others appeared to be afraid, shocked, or remorseful, but he didn't care that they would be held accountable, particularly their leader. First of all, my army usually completely destroys me when I receive punishment that goes against my will and behind my back, but I'm going to take a different approach. Going forward, all S-rank missions will be removed from Konoha and sent to other nations in need. Others enjoy Kirigakure, Kumogakure, Sanagakure, and even Taigakure. Additionally, I have reduced the portion of your budget that covered the majority of your expenses to 60% going forward. Iroh then turned to face the now shocked, motionless crowd and a furious Hiruzen. From now on, if you even try to go behind my back again, next time I won't be as lenient and will destroy all of Konoha. He then gestured for those closest to Naruto to approach, and he grinned when he saw Sasuke because Hitomi hadn't killed everyone and would need to watch out for Sasuke's welfare. Also, these people will be under my protection, and if anyone tries to harm them or a member of their clan, they will be killed regardless of whether they beg the Hokage or not. He then turned to face Hiruzen and his irate teammates. You, Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, are now formally stripped of your role as Hokage, and the council will also be disbanded. I'll be letting the clan heads make the decisions until I find a new Hokage who is genuinely level-headed and doesn't try to work behind my back. I'll have the last say, though, through a messenger bird they send me. As for the punishment, Sarutobi, you and your teammates will now have your arms and legs sealed, along with your chakra, which will only permit a minimal amount of movement compared to a civilian, he said. No, you will not do this, exclaimed Hiruzen, Sandaime, Hokage of Konohagakure, Kami no Shinobi, and the professor. He said, with a snap of his fingers, his personal Anbu looked like it was ready for battle. Danzo concurs with his former adversary, Root. With his emotionless men leaping out of the darkness, he said. Some villagers were hoping to kill the daimyo because of this. They were gravely misled when Iroh himself leapt from his position and landed in front of the troops with incredible strength. He calmly stopped his guardians with a hand gesture and said, You are so hungry you would defy the daimyo. He remarked, Oh, how low Konoha has fallen since the rule of the Shodaime and Nidaime. Stop talking. Wearing his old shinobi battle gear, Sarutobi shouted. Iroh shook his head at the folly of Hiruzen. With steely eyes at the tone, he said, I see you all are going to try to kill me. Very well. Let me show you why I'm called the Fire Daimyo. Despite this, Iroh appeared composed and uninterested as the troops charged at him. After saying, Die, you pitiful worms, he gathered an unexpected amount of fire in his right palm and thrust it forward. He said, Hi-Ken, Fire Fist. The fire burst from his fist, forming a massive orange flaming fist. The charging shinobi were caught off guard, and they paid the price of being burned alive by the red and orange flames. Iroh glared at Sarutobi's quivering form, ignoring their cries of agony and distress. He signaled his samurai and guardians to proceed with shackling the 4 traitors. Sorry we didn't come earlier, Naruto only arrived the day before, and he did everything he could to ensure the safety of those that followed him and those here, Iroh said, walking over to Naruto's friends during this time, with a startling smile. I'm here because he asked for my assistance, and I agreed. Until a better Hokage is found, Konoha will be ruled by me, so there won't be any more worries about the future, he said. I'm sorry to bother you, Demio Sama, but where is Naruto-kun? The question on everyone's mind, Ayame said. Iroh simply grinned and said, Naruto and Mito are on their way to Kumo. The current Raikage of Kumo is a longtime friend of his parents. Now, hold on a second, Hyuga-san. I know there is a lot of animosity between your clan and Kumogakure, but this Raikage is the one who deposed the last person who was in charge of capturing one of your one at the time. Therefore, there's no need, he said, interrupting Heishi. However, Yugo questioned, but why would he go there? Is it to escape the hunter.nin of Konoha? She expressed concern for her ex-partner, Anbu Sotecho. With a frown on his face, Iroh shook his head. No, he's going there to train Mito and himself. That's all I currently know, he said, glancing at Yugo. Nearly all of them exhaled in relief at this. Anko remarked humorously, that's Naruto-kun, okay. Always training with him. If there's one thing he needs to cut back on, it's training. Hell, he has even little Mito hooked into training. Those two are a pair of stamina freaks. Iroh simply chuckled at this before Asuma interrupted them by approaching from behind and bowing. Iroh Sama, Hiruzen Sarutobi and his 3 teammates have been captured, the samurai said, adding, despite Danzo's best efforts to fight, we outnumbered him and he is now in chakra cuffs and chakra draining seals. Iroh simply smiled. As they were about to question him, Iroh turned to face them and said, now, all of you, I'm going to say this now as a command from myself. If any, and I do mean any civilian or shinobi alike, try to hurt you in any way since you're friendly with Naruto and Mito, you are to kill them. They all gave him a startled look. I tell you this because, as I have stated, both the shinobi and the villagers of Konoha are nothing more than conceited, discriminatory idiots who believe they are unbeatable. Prior to this, I wasn't particularly concerned about Konoha, with the exception of Naruto and Mito, but now I realize that I made a mistake and a lot of things happened. With reluctant nods from each of them, he declared, I'm going to leave Konoha in the hands of those Naruto trusted more than anyone else from now on. Iroh laughed and said, good, then I shall take my leave, and don't worry. You'll hear from Naruto again. Trust me. He then turned to face his assembled troops and said, we leave then, receiving a hi from each of them. Kurenai said, I hope he's doing okay. But Hana shot her a snort. Of course he's fine, she said, because Naruto-kun is stronger than we all think. He'll be fine. You're absolutely correct, Anko said, the realm of Kami. As he began to open his eyes, Naruto moaned. He vaguely remembered speaking to Mito before he fainted and then nothing. There was nothing more than pure white when he looked around himself. The last time he experienced something similar, he was in Megami's realm, also known as Limbo. He rose from the bed and took a few steps while surveying the surroundings. You've matured, Naruto-kun. A voice that the blonde recognized said. His eyes grew to the size of dinner plates as he turned to face Megami, who he believed to be accompanied by a silver-haired goddess. However, he gave Megami a startled and surprised look in return. Megami, is that you? He continued to wonder if he was still dreaming. Megami merely grinned before approaching him. Once she was close enough, she said, let this prove it to you that it is me. Before kissing him again. Her direct action caused Naruto's and Kami's eyes to pop open, but he didn't back down. Instead, he embraced her more tightly. He knew that this was Megami because he felt the same chill from his last kiss run down his spine. Even though Megami was groaning, he surprised her by drawing her closer, and she was even more shocked when he began to rub her back sensuously. She had to end the kiss even though she was enjoying it so much. For the time being, Naruto was pushed slightly away from her until they were just an inch apart, after that with a tentative grab. Then, with a gratifying hum, she rested her head on his shoulder. Naruto simply grinned while stroking her smooth, silky hair. He quickly snapped to attention when he realized they weren't alone. When he looked up, Kami was smiling. He pushed Megami, who was still at ease in his arms, and she glanced up at him before turning to face him. Her face turned red with rage at that point, and she leapt away from him. Despite being perplexed by this action, Naruto shrugged and said, well, it's good to see you again, Megami-chan. But who's your friend here? He scratched the back of his head and remarked, she looks like your twin or something. After Kami simply grinned at Naruto, Megami realized what was happening. Kami had already materialized in front of Naruto, staring at him with a critical gaze. You're right, Megami-chan is really attractive and still growing, Kami remarked, unaware of Naruto's embarrassed blush. Yeah, But we do have more important things to do than flirt with Naruto-kun even though it's been so many years since I've seen him, Megami said, grinning as she watched. Naruto simply sighed in relief, which Megami caught and gave him an evil smirk. In a seductive tone, she says, besides, we can do more than flirt with him later. Naruto simply froze as a chill of either excitement or fear ran down his spine. He couldn't tell which it was, but he was certain of one thing. He was eager to see what she had planned. Megami-chan, could you please explain to me how I got here or what this place is called? He said, shaking his head at those thoughts. Or the fact that it's been years since we last saw one another. Well, for your first two questions, this realm is Kami's. She's my sister, he said, and Megami simply grinned at him before continuing. She pointed to the waving Kami. We haven't seen each other in a while because I wanted to wait for you to recover before I personally gave you more details about what it means to be my avatar, she explained. After blinking in surprise, Naruto grinned and said, ah, I see, no wonder she's as beautiful as you are, as well as you two looking alike. He did not notice Kami's face blushing when he complimented her. Megami, however, chose to postpone it until later. She started to say, now, Naruto, I know you probably wonder why you're here. Well, I can already tell you. You're still unconscious from your fight with, but was cut off. He frowned as he said, Ulquiorra. Yes, Ulquiorra, I know you're going to ask questions, so I'm just going to explain to you what he was and what kind of being he is, okay. Megami nodded and blinked. Naruto nodded as she said that. Kami snapped her fingers and said, good, sit down. This is going to take a while. Suddenly, a table and 4 chairs appeared. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the scene, but dismissed it because Kami was a goddess, though he did wonder why the 4th chair was there. Alright, where do we begin? Oh, I see. We begin at the beginning, when the living world was created, she said. Megami told him that there was no fighting, no bloodshed, no war, and no death when the world was first created. Everybody coexisted peacefully with one another. But then disaster struck when the first war between the first humans happened. How it happened was beyond anyone except that all we know is that someone tried to overthrow gods, exacting in a war between the ones who tried to overthrow us and the ones who worshipped us, she said, explaining that after the war ended, the world was nearly a complete wasteland but had once again flourished into the world Naruto knew. The technologies employed by the earliest humans were forgotten and destroyed forever, Kami said, but the ones that died in the war were the problem. Naruto cocked his head in perplexity. What? How could there be an issue with the dead? He said. According to Megami, the spirits of those who lost their lives in the war were either perplexed or filled with hatred of how they died or were still angry of the past and couldn't leave that behind. So, what took place? Naruto remarked, I know something had to be done with the dead spirits. You're right, something did happen. Kami and I decided to do our best to help. As a result, I took the spirits who were trying to find a way to pass over and be accepted into heaven so they could live out the rest of their immortal lives there in peace. After that, what became of the ones who were furious, or the animosity in that conflict? Naruto said, but he mentally chastised himself for asking after noticing Megami and Kami's dejected expressions. As a tear escaped her eye, Megami remarked, they had become. No. They turned into monsters. The emotions they had to the living world kept them chained there till the emotions ate away at them, turning them into what we call a hollow. A being that is created from dead spirits that has the negative emotions of dying, whether it be sadness of they died, anger of how it happened, hatred at who did it, all kinds of emotions like this is how they were created. In an attempt to console her, Naruto put a hand on hers and winced at this. They were creatures of all shapes and sizes, and all they were after changing were rampaging, hungry monsters. They fed on the spirits of the dead, she said, giving him a feeble smile before continuing. After years of deliberation, we ultimately chose to create a dimension for themselves because we were unsure of what to do with them. This location, known as Hiseo Mundo, served as both their home and their battlefield. Following this, we sealed the dimension off from heaven, hell, and the living world. We decided that if a hollow was formed, it would be returned to Hiseo Mundo after this decision was made. Megami remarked, inhaling deeply before meeting Naruto's gaze. As Kami stated, a tentative expression appeared on her face. What you fought Naruto was rather in a common case, a hollow, but a very rare breed of one because you see you fought against something called an Arankar, which is a hollow that has gone through its stages of normal, Manos, Ajukas, then Vasto Lord, which used to be the final form of what any hollow could become, but when Naruto noticed this, he said, let me speculate. What happened to cause these rare hollows to change into these Arankars? He said, receiving startled nods from both of them, at which point a frown of contemplation formed on his face. When Naruto's eyes turned bright blue, Megumi interrupted, saying, "That's right, and you Naruto are quite possibly lucky enough to have survived against that man, for you see you might have thought he was going all out against you, but..." When Naruto recalled the interruption of that, the very thing he's been holding back, he frowned. "I know. I could feel it, the man was still toying with me. Even with the limiter off, and even then, Bankai wasn't enough," he said. A flick at his forehead made him wince, and he blinked as he touched the red area. When he raised his head, he saw Megumi's lovely face frowning and her hand rotating. "That man was beyond a hollow itself, but we know this, Naruto-kun," she said, startling him. "Also, we saw what happened when you lost consciousness, how you lost control of your body. Naruto-kun, I'm sure you have questions about what that thing truly is, but, not even Kami or I truly know. All we can tell you is that, it's your inner hollow," she added. Naruto simply closed his eyes and absorbed everything they had told him, including the origins of his world, the first humans, the first war, and the formation of hollows. He clenched his jaw as he recalled that he couldn't even defeat Ulquiorra, and then he recalled that hole inside of him. He set his course for the future and steeled his eyes at that point. When he opened his eyes, Kami and Megumi gave a little gasp because his eyes had changed. They were a hollow's eyes, but his pupil was outlined in a glowing ethereal blue. They witnessed it, but they vanished. "All right, I'll just need to get stronger at damn the limits I have to face. In order to surpass Ulquiorra or anybody else, I will endure the 9 levels of hell and return stronger than before. Megumi Chan, you would be proud of me when I transform into the Avatar, the creature of death for the living world. I will become your judge and your executioner, and nobody will stop me," he screamed as an unusual wind blew out of him. Both of them reacted with surprise to this before Megumi gave her avatar a tender smile. "You've already made me proud, Baka." However, Kami couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement when she saw the expression in his eyes for that particular moment in his personal declaration. She couldn't shake the feeling that Naruto would grow up to be something more than her sister's avatar. She wasn't sure what it was, but she had a feeling he would become something even more. When she approached him and did the last thing neither of them expected her to do, it was an odd scene. Before kissing him, she stroked his face. She knew that this would either result in Megumi yelling at her or questions about why she did it, but for the moment, she didn't care. All she wanted was to give this man a chance, something that many others before him had never done. The opportunity to win her heart, and perhaps just possibly she will eventually fall in love with him. She probed a little after slipping her tongue through his startled mouth, then encircled his before retreating. She opened her eyes half lifted and saw Megumi's face in shock and Naruto's dazed expression. "I'll explain later," was the underlying message behind her reassuring smile at her sister. Kami then took hold of Naruto's shoulders and said, "Go, Naruto-kun. And keep your word to Megumi Chan and me. Be strong, Naruto-kun, so that even heaven and hell will tremble. Until then," she said in a seductive tone, "protect Mito Chan, because I'm sure she's going to become something very important to you later on." Knowing that she was aware of what had transpired between him and Mito caused Naruto to blush. He turned to see Megumi grinning at him when he felt a hand on his other shoulder. "Be stronger, Naruto-kun," Kami Chan advised. "Don't worry about your past transgressions. The people you killed have gone to heaven and are not harboring any animosity toward you. Instead, become the true avatar of death that I know you will be. Do you hear me when I say that you should stop regretting your past actions?" she said, sounding like a mother reprimanding her child. Naruto simply blinked before grinning. It's true that he had been having nightmares about the missions he was given, the killings, the murders, and the outright genocide he was told to carry out. He was internally tormented by what he had done, but he felt so calmed by Megumi's calming voice and the consolation that neither she nor Kami offered that it completely erased the memory of what he had done. "Thank you, Megumi Chan, Kami Chan," he said, shedding a tear as he spoke. As both goddesses held him, Naruto's body began to turn from his feet up. When Kami noticed this, she turned to see that Megumi had also noticed. "Naruto-kun, the next time you see us, I hope you can fully open to the ones that love you. Goodbye, Naruto-kun," they said in unison as they held him closer as he began to fade. Despite hearing them, Naruto's eyes continued to close. Even so, he gave a slight smile when they said the final line. Perhaps, just perhaps, he is capable of love. After that, Naruto's body vanished from their realm and into their arms. Both of them were crying, but not because they were sad about missing him. Rather, they were happy that they would see him again in the future and that he would be much stronger than he was now. They were not surprised when Kushina emerged from the glimmer of white energy behind them, tears streaming down her cheeks and a hint of pink tint added to her face. Following Kami and Megami's advice, she had been there the entire time, and what she saw shocked her once. Her son had developed into a strong, amazing man. Even though he was only 15, he was already an adult and would break many women's hearts. When she witnessed his interactions with Kami and Megami, she herself blushed oddly scarlet and wondered for a moment what that kiss felt like. Her body trembled at that moment, and she was overcome by the courage and bravery that blazed in every word he spoke as he released his power. Her son, Naruto, who sacrificed his humanity for her in order to spend her final moments with Mito, had transformed into the person he is today. A man of integrity who fulfills his commitments. Even though he must confront the devil directly. He looked so much like Minato, but there was also a difference that made her blush even more. When she looked up to see Kami and Megami's amused expressions, who most likely witnessed her interaction, Kushina shook her head. "Now, were you thinking about someone, Kushina-chan?" Kami smiled at Kushina and said. Megami laughed at Bingo Kushina's situation as her face lit up even more in a scarlet red. "I wasn't," she shouted, but neither goddess was persuaded. Kushina looked away from the floor. Kushina instantly melted into Kami's embrace after Kami gave her a smile. Kami could hear the woman sobbing softly. Why do I feel something for him? He is my own son." Their eyes softened on the woman as she sobbed into Kami's chest. She appeared to be both happy and sad because she wasn't the one defending them after witnessing Naruto shield Mito from the threats facing the world. It was all Naruto's doing. He was the one who reared Mito, trained her, fed and bathed her, read to her at night, and allowed her to sleep with him when she was afraid. Shushina, their own mother, was powerless to stop Naruto from protecting and raising Mito. Knowing that she was completely powerless to assist them broke her heart, and it only got worse as she began to view Naruto in a completely different light over time. Naturally, she suppressed the feelings, but they were becoming out of control, and seeing him now caused the dam to burst and the suppressed feelings to surface. Megami said, "Well, technically, Kushina isn't your son anymore." Kushina turned around and looked at Megami in an astonished manner. What do you mean? He's no longer my son," she said, her voice trembling with either grief or, oddly, hope. "Well, Kushina-chan, you see what I didn't tell you is that Naruto, your son, did die that night but was reborn as my avatar. His current body is his spiritual manifestation for what he would have looked like, but when the limiter comes off that is his true appearance," Megami said, clearing her throat. "His physical representation of you and Minato was destroyed when Q-chan's chakra entered him, so he is no longer really related to either of you. He is now his own person and has no blood ties to either of you. All of his genes were totally destroyed, but his physical attributes would have persisted," she said. Unknowingly, Kushina's eyes brightened and she exclaimed, "So, that means, all this time?" "That's correct. Naruto is also aware of this, but he has concealed it from Mito so that she is unsure of her reaction and that Naruto is no longer her brother," Kami remarked. For several more minutes, Kushina simply stood there, gazing at the two goddesses with vacant eyes. A smile appeared on her face at that moment. "Databang!" she yelled, amusing the two goddesses with excitement. With Uzumaki's eyes blazing with determination, Kushina pumped her fist into the air. "Fantastic! But how can I see them both when I'm?" she asked, pointing to her ghostly form, proving that she was deceased. Kami simply smiled and said, "Remember what we discussed earlier, when I inquired about your chances of reviving? How about right now?" she said, and the woman quickly nodded. "Until then, I think it would be best that you watch how things unfold in the living world and catch up with the current events that are to be taking place," she said, adding that it might take a few days to bring you back. After letting out a contented sigh, Kushina turned to face a screen depicting a hospital room in Kumogakure, where Naruto was lying with Mito at his side. As she gazed at Naruto, her eyes became glassy. "Yes, Mito-chan and Naruto-kun, I am so excited to see you again. Kushina is returning home." With hyperactivity, she yelled the final line. She could only hope that she would be able to express her feelings to Naruto when she was brought back. Hospital Kumogakure, the morphine, blood, death. Naruto's senses were struck by that as he was regaining consciousness, and at the moment, he was mentally detesting every moment he spent wherever he was. The light struck his eyes, causing him to quickly close them after attempting to open them. Before opening them gradually to acclimate to the light, he uttered a few minor curses and made an effort to recall everything that had transpired. He remembered witnessing Ulquiorra retreat into a portal while he was engaged in combat. A few feet away, He recalled the Kumo shinobi. Then he recalled hearing Mito's voice beckoning to him. Everything else was a blur after that. He felt a tiny weight on his stomach when he attempted to stand up, and when he looked down, he noticed the distinctive red hair. As he remembered what she had done, he ran a hand through her hair and smiled softly, knowing who it was. To risk her life for him by jumping into danger like that. He scowled as he recalled the time she nearly died and would have perished if it weren't for him. He thanked him in his head before examining her state. He noticed that she was wearing the same outfit as before. However, he could see from her face that she had not slept for some time. She had been crying, as evidenced by the faint red tears on her face. He chastised himself in his head for causing her such anxiety. "I'm so sorry, Mito-chan," he muttered. He attempted to gently get out of bed after that, but he was completely clueless. Mito was awake and alert. Her eyes glistened with tears as she slammed them open and stared directly into his shocked ones before she pushed herself back into the hospital bed and tackled Naruto. Naruto-kun. She buried her head in his bandaged chest and sobbed. While holding Mito, Naruto merely moaned a little, still experiencing some pain, but he shook it off. He ran a hand through her hair and sighed as he felt her body rack with hiccups and sobs. Mito pulled herself away from him until she was almost in front of him after she had calmed down a little. When Naruto looked into her eyes, he saw relief and joy, but if the bags under her eyes were any indication, he could also see how exhausted she was. "Mito-chan," he said with a sigh, "how long has it been since you've slept?" he said. When he gave her a knowing look, Mito tried desperately to look away from him, but she was unable to do so. Knowing there was no hope, she sighed. "No, I haven't slept since I woke up from your fight with whoever that guy was, when I used Kyuubi's chakra. I've been here the entire time," she said, hoping he wouldn't be upset with her. She missed Naruto's simple smile as he wrapped his hand delicately around her body and lifted her up, causing the girl to squeak in surprise. After that, he covered them up and lay down on the bed, making room for Mito on his left side. Then, staring into her bewildered eyes, he said, "You need your sleep, Mito-chan, even if you're in a hospital." He said, "Hospital," as if it were poison, which made the girl laugh. "Let's just get some rest, shall we? In any case, I need a little more," he said. Mito simply responded by embracing him even more and mumbling something as she fell asleep as soon as possible. She concluded, "If it's with you, then I'll sleep anywhere, Naruto-kun, as long as you're safe," before falling asleep. However, Naruto eyed her before grinning, so she never knew how much her final words meant to him. He put one arm on her head and another around her waist. Then, before darkness began to encroach on his eyes as well, he pulled her closer while he laid his head on top of her red hair and sighed softly. He uttered the words, "Me too. Mito-chan. Me too," before dozing off as well. A day later. "So, let me be clear. You want to live and train here in Kumogakure until you both believe you are strong enough to defend yourself from your enemies," Naruto says, pointing to him. With a stoic expression, Ace said. After waking up for the first time in a day, Naruto requested a meeting with Ace. After explaining everything to the Raikage, the man was remarkably silent and composed throughout. Only a small movement of his eyebrows revealed his stoic and uninterested expression. With Mito at his side, Naruto nodded. They had been growing closer ever since the Hidachi incident and the fight with Ulquiorra. Even though Mito recoiled at the action, Naruto didn't bat an eye at it or the look he received from the Raikage. Raikage nodded again before slamming his hand into his desk and shattering the poor thing. "What's in it for me, aside from the fact that you two are the children of Minato and Kushina? Indeed, I was a friend of theirs during the war." He scratched his beard and said, "But I have to get something out of this." "Well, you can boast that you and your brother Killer Bee were the ones who trained Mito-chan here to be as strong as I know she will be in the future, and also the ones who housed someone of my reputation within your walls, so you won't need to worry about an enemy attack," Naruto said with a smile. He knew that nobody would attack where he stayed unless they wanted to kill him. Raikage simply stared at him for a few seconds before laughing uncontrollably, startling Mito and raising Naruto's eyebrows. The man wiped a tear from his eye and said, "Of course you can stay." After he had calmed down a little, "There, I was kidding. However, it is a benefit that you are here. However, if what I've heard is accurate, the fire daimyo himself went down there and arrested the Sandaime and his 3 teammates in addition to killing a few shinobi who attempted to obstruct him, so I'm glad you two are here and made the decision to leave Konoha. Naruto-san, I assume the daimyo took your call." He laughed as he said that. Naruto's eyes widened slightly before he smiled. Iroh was one of the most reliable people he had ever met, and he had now fulfilled his promise to atone for Konoha's previous transgressions against his family. "Mito-chan, Will you go outside for just a minute? I need to talk to Raikage. Sama privately for a minute, okay? He said, glancing at Mito. Before she left the room, the girl gave him a displeased look. He then turned to Face and said, Raikage. Sama, may I ask you a question? Yes, Naruto-san. What would that be? I wonder what the young man needs, he said. Although I realize this is a lot to ask, I would like you three to assist Mito in learning how to control Kyuubi's chakra and practice doing so. You know what's inside her, so please help. She will require assistance in managing Kyuubi's enormous chakra, but I will assist her in her shinobi skills when I can, he said. Knowing that Mito is the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and that it takes a lot of training for a Jinchuriki to fully master their Biju, Raikage simply closed his eyes and thought. He has witnessed firsthand how difficult it is to control a Biju with its enormous chakra reserves in a single human. However, Kyuubi was a more powerful entity than any other Biju. However, he always enjoyed a challenge. Alright, when are you ready to begin training her? He said. I've brought everything from our family with me since we left Konoha, and I'm going to start training her as soon as I can. It's been in a pocket-sized seal inside my body for a long time. He touched an Uzumaki symbol where its heart is, saying, but with this, she can learn what she needs to, so she can get stronger. Before he had an idea, he nodded. How about you? Why would you need to strengthen yourself when I know you are strong enough to take on a cage? He said. With a sigh, Naruto combed through his hair. I gave him a startled look when he said, let's just say, I've got enemies stronger than any cage in history and leave it at that. However, Naruto's glare made him realize he wasn't in the mood to elaborate. I see. Well, may I inquire where you plan to train? I am aware of a location where Yugito and Killer Bee practice their Biju abilities. You could accompany Mito and live and train there. I can send off the missions the Fire Daimyo to myself and the Kaminari Daimyo while this is going on. How would it sound if I sent you a messenger bird when one did arrive? He said. After giving it some thought, Naruto had to admit that the plan was sound since it would allow him to create a covert training area. Additionally, being nearer to Mito is a benefit that will aid in her training. Very well, it's a deal, Raikage. Sama. Could you have either Killer Bee or Yugito-san meet us so they could take us to this place? He said, turning to Face A, he said. He pointed to the door and said, of course I think Yugito is here now. He turned to see the blonde woman standing there with an inquisitive expression on her face. Naruto simply blinked before grinning at the woman, which caused her to blush a little. I noticed this and would discuss it with her later. I assume you heard that last part, Yugito. Well, it would be great if you could have Naruto and Mito follow you back to the island, he said. After giving a quick glance, Yugito turned back to Naruto, blushing slightly. Versus very well, it will be done Raikage. Sama, now if you would wait for me outside Naruto-san. I need to talk to Raikage. Sama for a minute, she said, finding it oddly difficult to refrain from calling him Naruto-kun, for some reason. Perhaps Nibi was tampering with her body once more. As he approached the door, Naruto nodded and said, that's reasonable, well till then Raikage. Sama, I'll be seeing you later. The door then clicked shut. Raikage. Sama, I'm here to report about the aftermath of Naruto and that strange man's battle a day ago, and I have to say, you're going to have to take a breather for this one, Yugito said after he left, turning to Face A. 20 minutes later, Kumogakuria outside Cage Tower. So, Yugito-san, where is this place exactly? Mito remarked, unsure of their destination. It's going to be the place where you and Naruto-san will be training and living from now on until the appropriate time comes when you can either live in Kumo or stay there, Yugito said with a smile as she was walking. Killer Bee. Sensei and I train in our Biju powers on this island, but we also live there because it's remote from society and unseen, she continued. Ooh, she exclaimed. Well, it seems like the ideal location for training, Naruto continued. What will we be training in, Anyo, Naruto-kun? She said, her face bewildered. She pouted again as Naruto merely laughed and rubbed her head. We'll be practicing our shinobi skills, he said. You still have a lot of work to do if you want to get stronger, and I need to learn a few more techniques here and there. Oh, Mito said, repairing her disheveled hair. Anyway, Mito-chan, you need to make me a promise when we start training, okay? As the three boarded a boat to the island, he said. What? She said. You must swear to me that you will always try your hardest and never give up. The training I'm going to give you will make everything else seem easy. I won't lie or say it will be simple. Because it won't be. Can you assure me that I will always persevere and never give up? His eyes were serious as he spoke. Without a moment's hesitation, Mito said, never If I have to go through your training in order to become as strong as you, I will. In addition to that, she said, blushing slightly. Naruto and Yugito, who were listening in on the conversation, raised an eyebrow at this and said, "Yes, what is Mito-chan?" he said. She blushed brighter as she said, "I want to be strong enough to protect you. I want to be able to protect you when you're the one who needs it. I don't want to see you hurt again. Mito-chan. Thank you," Naruto said, leaning closer to her face after blinking and smiling. "And he promised that you would become stronger before planting another kiss on her cheek." Mito blushed completely at this, and Yugito gave him a startled expression. Those two definitely have a close relationship. I think it's cute, and I wonder if it will be necessary in the future. If they do produce something, you ought to join Tama. Just take a look at that man's physique, purr. Nibby. I. Naruto.kun, he, wa. Giggle. Relax, Mito-chan. It was just a cheek kiss, so there's nothing to feel ashamed of. You're lucky to have him to yourself for the next few years, so perhaps. No, I can't. I mean, I want to, but. Kyuubi concluded by saying, "Don't worry about it for now, Mito-chan. The future is still ongoing, ever-changing. You'll have plenty of chances to tell him how you truly feel." My true feelings. For Naruto.kun, Naruto and Mito have been in Kumo for 3 years, and they are genuinely overjoyed. Within their walls, they have experienced far greater tranquility than Konoha ever offered. They had gotten along well with the villagers and were essentially related to Raikage and his brother, Killer Bee. Yugito, on the other hand, grew closer to them over the course of the 3 years and was essentially always with them. Since Raikage let Mito into the academy and after she graduated, she was placed in an apprenticeship, making them 2 of Kumo's best shinobi. Her sensei was Naruto, who was also Anbu part-time. When necessary, they completed missions, and during their downtime, they would both return home to train. When Jiraiya arrived to speak with him during the 3 years, Naruto asked him for assistance with Mito's training. The man accepted with pleasure, but Naruto had become a little irate over something after a year of training. Or someone. Since Mito was a newborn, the woman has never once visited to check on them, so he told Jiraiya that Tsunade was the object of his thoughts. He was aware of Tsunade's passing in Konoha, but her goddamn daughter was Mito. Naruto was furious when he told Jiraiya to bring her ass back, even if it meant beating her up to remind her that there were still people in the world who needed her. She returned, and following a protracted conversation between Jiraiya, Naruto, and herself, she, her apprentice Shizune, and their pet pig Tun were installed in Kumo as the Raikage and his family's personal medic. Nin. The man didn't want to be separated from his family any longer, so he moved in with Jiraiya, Naruto, and Mito. The home they occupied was constructed on the island where the two had spent the previous 3 years training. There were 2 staircases leading to the 2nd and 3rd floors. The dining room, kitchen, and living room were on the 1st floor. There was a built-in outdoor hot spring with separate areas for men and women. The library's 2nd floor was created with all of the scrolls and techniques from the Namikaze and Uzumaki clans. The entire house had 10 rooms, including 5 on the 2nd and 3rd floors. Additionally, the 2nd and 3rd floors had 2 bathrooms. The master room and the present clan head's office were located on the 3rd floor, along with training posts and training weights ranging from regular weights to weights that drain chakra. There was also a training dojo on the right side of the compound. There was a garden with a variety of flowers and medicinal herbs on the opposite side of the compound. Actually, it was Mito's idea, and Naruto claimed to have inherited Kushina's passion for gardening. However, no one voiced any complaints because Mito needed the medicinal herbs to learn medical jutsu and healing techniques. At first, the compound was constructed exclusively for Naruto and Mito as a place to rest during training, but after speaking with the Raikage about certain clan matters, surprisingly, it appears that Naruto and Mito were placed under the CRA, so Naruto personally constructed the clan's facility. Both had responded to this, but Naruto was expressionless that day and showed no emotion at all. Mito was internally struggling with herself and Kyuubi, wondering how likely it was that this would occur. The compound was also created in Kyuubi's image, much to Kyuubi's delight and surprise. It appeared to be guarding the clan home because it had a carving of Kyuubi's head above the main doorway and 9 wooden tails surrounding the field and compound. The Namikaze and Uzumaki symbols were placed on either side of the main gate to the house, with Kyuubi standing between them and her tails encircling both, joining them for all eternity. Naruto and Mito's relationship was a little odd. At times, they would behave like siblings, and at other times, they would behave like lovers. Because of something that happened to them a year ago. Rewind Mito, who had been sparring with Naruto for as long as 30 minutes, was panting next to him as Naruto sat on the grass outside. Never in her life did she feel so worn out. Trying to catch her breath, she said, "Huff. Huff. And Naruto-kun. See. Can I ask you something?" Raising an eyebrow at her, Naruto said, "Sure, Mito." "Chan, what is it?" "I wonder what Mito is interested in," he said. Mito looked up at him with a slight flush on her face after catching her breath. What are your thoughts on me?" She asked the question that had been bothering her for a while. Kyuubi was congratulating herself inwardly for having the courage to speak what she needed to. After giving a stupid blink, Naruto grinned and said, "What do I think of you? To be honest, I think you're a great girl who will grow up to be a stunning woman, Mito. Chan. In fact, I'm fairly certain that you'll have to beat the guys off with a stick in another 2 years. Hell, you won't need my protection anymore soon," he said. As she blushed at what he had said, Mito raised her head and said, "No, you will always be necessary to me." Naruto gave her a startled look as she said that, but she quickly realized what she had said and avoided making eye contact. She began to cry as she spoke. What I mean is, I don't want to lose you. I want you to be by my side. I don't want to disappear from my life. Mito. Naruto's eyes softened at this, but she continued talking. You will always be necessary in my life. I don't want you to go." As she turned away from him, she yelled the final line. However, that came to an end when Naruto seized her and embraced her. She tensed up before embracing him and sobbing into his chest. Naruto held her there while he considered what she had said and scolded himself for being so foolish. He tried to calm her as best he could by saying, "Mito. Chan. I'm not going anywhere. You will always have me in your life." After a little more sniffling, Mito looked up into Naruto's eyes and said, Naruto-kun. I want to tell you something," grabbing Naruto's attention. "What is it, Mito? Chan?" He comforted her by rubbing her back. She tried to finish her sentence by saying, "I want to tell you, ever since I was little, I always tried to catch up to you. I wanted to be as strong as you were even now, but something else came. It was. Go, Kit. You're capable. I love you, Naruto-kun. That's the truth about how I feel about you." This took Naruto completely by surprise, so it wasn't shocking when he fell back onto the grass with Mito on top of him, she said before kissing him. They had not yet separated when they landed, so Naruto makes his choice after a few seconds of being taken aback by Mito's move. Mito puts her arms around his neck as he encircles her body, drawing her closer to him. Mito becomes even more confident when she gives Naruto a deeper kiss, causing his eyes to widen slightly before he continues to do so. Before they stopped to catch their breath, this went on for 3 minutes. Mito blushed as they did, and her hair looked pale in contrast. In contrast, Naruto was wearing a dazed expression and a slight flush. Naruto awakens from his daze after a few minutes and looks at Mito's humiliated body. He was having a mental dialogue as he did this. "She loves me. We were no longer siblings because of the incident, but still. Naruto, you and I are both sufficiently aware of your genuine feelings for her. Naruto, you can't keep it a secret any longer. Express your true feelings to her." Zangetsu instructed his partner to inform her. "I am aware of this, Zangetsu, but what if I cause her harm? It is unlikely that I could forgive myself. I've known you long enough to know that you have an unbreakable will and that nothing can harm her, so there's no need to worry, Naruto. Even your inner hollow has boundaries that he wouldn't cross, so he wouldn't dare attempt to harm her. I suppose you're right. Perhaps I've been afraid to tell her the truth all along, but I'm not going to do that anymore." Naruto disappeared from his soulscape. Before turning his head to the right and seeing Naruto's inner hollow standing there grinning slightly of his own, Zangetsu grinned. "You must have something to say, right?" Zangetsu uttered those words. "Hey, it's about time King got his act together. In this manner, we can ultimately overcome the final obstacle preventing his full potential," Yami said. Zangetsu nodded, realizing that Naruto's actual strength and ability were always constrained by the boundaries he kept hidden. Over time, these boundaries were removed, and the one boundary that Naruto had never really felt was finally destroyed. Love was that boundary. Love for Mito was the thing that kept him from realizing his full potential because he was never sure if it was a sibling love or something more. His training would take off once it was over. "So, when will you show him who you are?" Zangetsu said. Yami simply smiled and said, "Later on. Right now, King has other things to worry about," before vanishing. After giving a nod of agreement, Zangetsu turned to face the sky and watched as the sun lit up his face. When he looked around, He saw trees blowing in the wind and grassy fields. Zangetsu said, "Naruto. You know what I like most?" While grinning and closing his eyes. "The sky, the grass, and the trees. My favorite thing is nature itself, and it really comes alive when you're at your happiest." "Thank you, Naruto," he said before disappearing as well. Mito was startled when Naruto opened his eyes and gathered her in an embrace, but she accepted it. He said, "Mito-chan, I never knew. You felt that way about me before." Observing the change in her body posture, he could tell she was anxious. After giving her a warm smile and drawing her closer, he drew his head back until he was facing Mito. He then said, "And I'm glad to say, I love you too, Mito-chan," and before Mito could respond, Naruto kissed her. When he said those words, Mito's heart leapt with joy. She had never felt happier in her life, and now that she knew Naruto loved her too, she melted into his arms. They remained in that state for 20 minutes before dozing off in the fields. Everything changed for them that day, and to be honest, it was for the better. "Well done, Kit. It's my turn now, but I just hope I can get in touch with him somehow." End of flashback. They would constantly be in each other's company after that. They would behave like siblings around other people, but only when they were by themselves or with Jiraiya, Tsunade, Shizune, Yugito, Raikage, and Killer Bee, who were aware of their relationship. They would play together or hold each other, and since neither of them was ready yet, they would only sleep together at night. However, Mito had also noticed Yugito, a girl, staring at Naruto with the same intensity. It was brimming with compassion and love. Not surprisingly, Naruto prevented her from being raped in Kumo. The reason for this was that some members of Kumo's council despise Yugito for her beliefs and do everything in their power to either kill or subjugate her, usually behind his back. However, Naruto made friends with Yugito and Nibi for life after saving them in her innocence. Following this incident, Naruto kicked open Raikage's doors and gave an explanation while marching through Kumo with Yugito in a bridal carry. After hearing what had happened, it would be an understatement to say that Raikage was incensed. The man was absolutely furious. Naruto followed the irate man when he ordered a council meeting, where they discovered that some of A's advisors had ordered the attack and suicide missions against the woman. They were also the ones who had begun targeting Mito with assassins. That infuriated Naruto even more, and he quickly killed the advisors in cold blood while splattering himself in blood. Naruto then threatened to kill the Raikage unless his people were straightened out. Without hesitation, Raikage had given the order for anyone attempting to harm Yugito or Mito in any way to do so. Before being put to death, those individuals would endure physical and psychological torture. Following the incident with Kumo's council, Naruto was given the moniker Barati Shinigami, which translates to Bloody Reaper. It's funny that some of that is accurate. Additionally, during the course of the 3 years, Naruto had been carrying out the tasks that Iroh had given him. These tasks included everything from straightforward diplomatic missions to signing treaties with other nations to killing traitors who were plotting to turn on the Fire Daimyo. He was referred to as the Feiya Daimyo Taishi, Fire Daimyo representative, by other daimyos he had encountered. Additionally, he traveled to Sanagakure on a diplomatic mission and was asked to assist the Kazekage in repairing his son's seal. When Naruto discovered that the boy was Gaara no Sabaku and that he possessed the one-tailed Ichibi no Shukaku, he stabilized the seal right away, winning the respect and trust of the Kazekage and his village. However, Naruto became good friends with the Sabaku children, making 2 friends. The oldest sibling, a young girl named Tamari no Sabaku, who trained in using her battle fan and the element wind as her main ninjutsu Repridor, and a young teen boy named Kankuro, who was training in puppetry. The final one was Gaara no Sabaku, a young child who had gotten along with everyone around him after having his seal fixed. All things considered, the journey to Sanagakure was a huge success and a strong ally of Kumogakure and the Fire Daimyo. When other nations learned that he was in Kumo, they took it upon themselves to request an alliance with him, which he accepted with open arms. Additionally, their training over the course of 3 years increased to enormous proportions for both of them. Naruto had opened everything from the night he left the Namikaze residence at the start of their training, and presented Mito with a 3-year training schedule. Initially, she would practice chakra control using Kage Bushin no Jutsu. She would continue honing her katana skills along the way. Additionally, he had her practicing her ninjutsu and fuinjutsu. She couldn't perform genjutsu because of her enormous reserves of chakra from Kyuubi, but she could dispel it with enough time. She developed over the course of 3 years by learning and mastering a number of skills, including the Rasengan, which Jiraiya taught her, and the 2/3 steps in Hiraishin no Jutsu. She also began manipulating elements after learning that she had affinities for wind and water from a piece of chakra paper Naruto gave her. As a result, she kept training until she became proficient in her affinities. And she did. After 3 years of intense training from Naruto, or what she called his training at Hell's military school, she was now between expert and master in Fuinjutsu, mid. Junin level in ninjutsu, low to mid. Level Junin in taijutsu, low level Junin in genjutsu because she couldn't do them, cage. Level in kenjutsu, and cage. Level in chakra control. Overall, Mito's shinobi skills ranged from high Junin to low cage. She did, however, learn that you should never reveal your actual abilities until they are absolutely necessary. Naruto told her that even though she was stronger than average for her age, she still needed to gain experience in the field and conceal her true abilities because there were people out there who would try to take advantage of her. Naruto had now completely mastered all of his shinobi arts training, including the use of ninjutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu, kenjutsu, and fuinjutsu. He primarily worked on Jikken-Kan, time-space ninjutsu, in the shinobi arts because he was aware of the area's immense potential and because only his father and the Naidame were aware of the ninjutsu. He made every effort to develop some jutsu using the skill. However, he has only made a handful thus far. He was a master of the shinobi arts aside from that. As Ulquiorra described it, Naruto now drowned himself in his skills and no longer concealed his abilities as a Shinigami. He dedicated himself to making and perfecting various forms of Kido, including Bakudo, Hado, and the last one, Ringu Kido, Healing Kido, only had a handful of Healing Kido spells made so far, at least 10. He was far more proficient in Hakuda, hand combat, than he had previously been. For example, during his battle with Ulquiorra, neither his fists nor his kicks caused any cuts or bruises. At that time, he had trained to the point where, when combined with his vicious fighting style, his strength in Hakuda would cause the terrain to collapse under the force of his kicks and blows. Even with the 8 gates open and Guy's weights removed, Tsunade and Hell Guy's combined strength would still be insufficient. At this point, Megumi and Kami were the only people Naruto really knew who were stronger than him. The art of a Shinigami using his Zanpakuto to its maximum potential is called Zanjutsu. For some reason, it sounded better than just another Kenjutsu style, so he called it Zanjutsu. He determined that the art would be used to practice sword katas as well as to strengthen your relationship with your Zanpakuto until you were in perfect harmony. He was once informed by Zangetsu that Naruto would have to fully master him in order to unleash his actual power. His speed in Ho-Oh is unmatched. He was significantly quicker than he was 3 years ago because, along with Zanjutsu, the art itself was his favorite skill. Battles between him and Zangetsu tested his combat speed. He continued to practice the skill during this time and continues to do so today. He would say that the jutsu itself was more of a primal way of the flash step, even though he already knew long ago that his speed was faster than the Hiraishin's. Given how much the jutsu resembled Ho-Oh, Minato was a genius in its creation. In addition, he had been surreptitiously observing and studying Mito's katana for some time. He had noticed that the weapon had a very familiar energy, and it surprisingly radiated the same power that Zangetsu had when he had first trained with him. During their training, he also noticed some odd things happening with Mito. For instance, occasionally he would see her appearance change and transform into a Shinigami outfit similar to his own when he first became a Shinigami, but then he would return to her regular clothes. Though he did file away what he saw for later, he believed his mind was playing tricks on him. Just in case. Additionally, the growing girl told him about Kyuubi's secret feelings for him during the 3 years since the incident involving him and Mito. In reality, Naruto wasn't as shocked as Mito had assumed he would be. He was completely taken aback to learn that a celestial being like Kyuubi had feelings for him, but he somehow anticipated it. How did he perform? Even now, he is unsure, but he promised Mito and Kyuubi that he would develop a sealing jutsu to separate the two of them. He used a sealing jutsu, which separated the two entities but left them spiritually inked. Although he was unable to fully execute a jutsu that destroyed Megumi's power, he came very close. That day, he smiled with satisfaction because the seal connected Mito and Kyuubi spiritually as well as physically by overlapping the Shiki Fuin. However, he was blown away by the beauty of the woman he saw when Kyuubi changed out of Mito's body. In Mito's mindscape, Kyuubi changed from the enormous 9-tailed fox it was to a long, red-headed woman. Like Mito, she had tan skin and 3 whisker-like marks on either side of her face. She also wore what was known as Kyuubi no Kitsune, but she also had crimson red eyes with fox slits inside. She had flowing red 9 fluffy tails with orange tips and a pair of fluffy red fox ears. However, Kyuubi's perky D-cup breasts were visible to everyone because she was not wearing any clothes at the time. Fortunately, she, Mito, and Naruto were the only people in the compound's sealing chamber at the time. When Naruto first saw her form, he blinked owlishly before his mouth dropped open in shock and his eyes widened, but before he could react, Kyuubi and Mito tackled him to the ground. The two were so ecstatic that they continued to embrace and kiss Naruto until the poor teen passed out. After 3 years, the two are now prepared to leave Kumo's protection and return to the outside world. In the Raikage's office, we could see the Raikage looking intently at the other two figures in the room. The first was a 5'6" girl with tan skin and 6 whisker marks on her face. She had red long hair that hung down her back and some of it framed her face. Her vivid violet eyes conveyed compassion and warmth to the person next to her. She was wearing a tight, fitting orange tank top that exposed her mid-drift and hugged her growing C-cup. She wore a long, crimson vest with sleeves that was stuffed with various scrolls. The Namikaze and Uzumaki symbols, as well as Kyuubi's crest between them, were displayed on the vest's back. She was wearing blue shinobi sandals underneath her form-fitting crimson shinobi pants. A kunai and shuriken pouch was fastened to her left hip, and her katana was safely strapped inside its sheath on her right. On her forehead, she wore a Kumogakure headband as well. The girl smiled softly as she glanced at the figure next to her. She was the 14-year-old Mito Uzumaki Namikaze, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze's sister, or girlfriend, the third container of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the genin of Kumogakure, and Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze's student. She was currently standing at attention in front of the Kumo cage for another mission. According to the man on the man's stature and rigidity, the figure next to her was male. His height of 6 feet 0 inches and his stance simply demonstrated that he was an experienced fighter. The man's blonde hair was spiky, the back extended past his neckline, and the bangs reached his eyebrows. Though sapphire blue in color, his eyes revealed strength, wisdom, and restraint of something greater. Similar to Mito, this man had tanned skin, but his muscles were visible through the material he was wearing. A pair of dark black pants with black combat boots at the bottom were worn underneath the man's sleeveless black tank top, which revealed his six-pack, which was now growing into an 8. The man had a pouch on his left hip, just like Mito. Last but not least, he wore black fingerless gloves plated with the kanji phrase Shi no Abata, Avatar of Death. His appearance was completed with a long-sleeved, pitch-black trench coat that had a white flame design dancing underneath. It appeared as though Mito had both clan crests on the back, with the Kyuubi entwined between them. However, behind the crests, he also displayed the Goddess of Death's own insignia, her arms protectively draping over them. Additionally, he had a red rosary strap that ran from his chest to his right shoulder and held a bandage-up blade on his back. His left bicep was then strapped with a Kumogakure headband, and his right bicep was strapped with a Fire Daimyo insignia. This man was Fire Daimyo's unofficial Kasai Ra, Dai Sutaicho, and captain of Kumogakure, Junin Sensei Mito Uzumaki Namikaze, the Goddess of Death, Megami's avatar, and Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Although Raikage gave the two individuals in front of them a detached look, he was secretly proud of being the first to support them in their hour of need and would say that these two were unquestionably already members of his family. He was pleased with their progress after 3 years. He was aware of the difficulties they had faced at the time, but he, along with Kaminari Daimyo and the Fire Daimyo, helped them get off the path that led to Kumo. However, the two people in front of him were some of Kumo's pride and joy. To Mito, she was the tiny ray of happiness and vitality that Kumo needed to cheer itself up when it needed it most. Hell, whenever she visited him, she made him and the employees in the tower happy. Even though he wasn't native, Naruto was Kumo's pride and had saved them from numerous situations that might have resulted in war over the previous 3 years. He completed high-level missions to aid Kumo in general while he was in Anbu, and even if Naruto was in training at the time of the call, he would be prepared. Raikage was aware that these two were stronger than they should have been for their age, but he also had to concede that they would need it given their enemies. The only thing Mito truly lacked was experience, as she was already at the elite Junin level to mid-Sanin. She will be a formidable force once she achieves that. He was aware that the man was much younger than him and lacked his level of combat expertise, but Naruto's remarkable capacity to develop with each battle and learn things that take others years to master, along with his mastery of the shinobi arts, made up for this. He was aware that Naruto had a lot of restraint when he used his strange powers, which are among the few he has seen, but he had to do so to avoid hurting people around him. Since the battle 3 years ago, Naruto has kept his training in those skills and his weapon a secret from everyone, and he is certain that not even Mito has seen his full extent. However, he was aware that Mito and Naruto were both extraordinary individuals in both life and combat. Hello you two, I know you just woke up, but this is very important, he said after clearing his mind of his thoughts. They both raised an eyebrow when he said, you see, I just received a mission from a client who stated that she needs someone to help take back control of Wave Country from a tyrant named Gato. Is this Gato from Gato Industries again? Mito remarked, unsure of the purpose of this mission. Yes, that is accurate, and it appears that the man has been in charge of the nation for years. Even the Water Daimyo is powerless to stop him. For this reason, the man has also requested assistance in order to murder him and destroy everything he owns in the nation. Do you have any questions? Indeed, what are we to anticipate from this mission? I need to know at least a rough estimate of what Mito and I will have to deal with, Naruto said. I would say not much, except for the occasional thugs and bandits, though I would say the man might be hiring some missing nin. So be on the lookout is all I can say, Reikage said, scratching his beard before speaking. He received nods from both of them. All right, but could you tell us the mission's rank, Reikage? Sama? Mito said this because she was curious about the mission's level of difficulty. Reikage simply laughed. He and Naruto could see the excitement and giddy feeling of a mission behind her eyes. Later in life, Naruto was beaten out of his memories of those moments when he was like that. He received a nod from Naruto and a broad smile from a nearly glowing Mito. It's a C bordering low B rank Mito. Now, I normally don't let Genin go on such a high-ranking mission, but seeing as how well taught you are and who is leading the mission, you should be just fine, he said. Hoo. We can go on a high mission, Naruto-kun, and I can't wait to begin demonstrating my strength. Datbeo. She pumped her fist into the air as she spoke. Like always, Naruto ruffled her hair and laughed with Reikage. This caused Mito to pout like a child, just like she used to do. Of course, Mito-chan, but you don't have to prove yourself to me. I already know how strong you are. Now when are we going to leave, Reikage? Sama? I'd say at 10 a.m., Naruto said, and simply shrugged, receiving a nod from both of them. I kept staring at their retreating backs until he remembered something crucial. Very well, then we shall take our leave to get ready, Naruto said, turning back to the door with Mito at his heels. Hold on, I forgot to mention this. The client's father, he's asked help from Konoha, so there is sure to be some of their shinobi there as protection, so please don't start anything. Very well, Reikage. Sama, now by your leave, Naruto said, receiving a worried nod from Mito. But Naruto narrowed his eyes at that before nodding as well. Good, you two have been dismissed, he said, and both of them nodded before leaving. They exhaled a sigh of relief when they left, knowing that this mission would either cause problems for Kumo or Konoha as a whole. Beyond the cage tower regarding the mission, Anyo, Naruto-kun, what will we do if we do encounter Konoha-nin? Mito inquired, a little anxious about the impending mission. Without altering his gait, Naruto simply turned to face her and said, Mito-chan, nothing will happen. Even if something did happen, you're strong enough to defend yourself, and even then, I'm here to help, so there's nothing to worry about. So that we can get an early start, how about we pack up and go to the gate? He said, causing Mito to smile. With a nod from Naruto, she said, okay, and in addition, we have to go say goodbye to Ero, Kyofu, Tsunade, Daibo, Godmother, and Shizune. Chan. That's true, Shizune isn't as bad, but those two would be really worried for us if we didn't tell them where we were going, he said. Mito muttered, before approaching Naruto and taking his hand, holding it as they walked. Naruto simply grinned at her gesture and gently put his hand around hers as they returned to the compound. The realm of Kami-so, Kushina, are you prepared? You must be thrilled to see them once more, don't you? Kami said, her eyes amused by the giddy woman in front of her, while Kushina simply stared at Kami as if she were a moron. I am, of course. The giddy but now irate beauty said, I can't believe you'd ask that question. I've been waiting for those two to see me again for 3 years, and it's made all the more painful not being able to watch how they changed because you kept it from me. Kami simply rolled her eyes and grinned at Kushina's juvenile performance. True, but then again I know there's another reason you want to get down there fast. Isn't there? Megami said, laughing at her behavior. Megami said with a cunning smirk, before blushing in shame at what Megami was hinting at. Kushina cocked her head for a minute. Well, how am I not able to? I mean, I am aware that both of you are eager to see him. Even though her blush was still there, she smirked as if she had won the lottery and said, I know for a fact you two haven't seen how much they've changed over the 3 years. Both goddesses blushed at this and turned away, oblivious to Kushina's peace sign. Now, Kushina, when I bring you back, I don't know where you will be exactly, but I'd say you will be near the border of Fire Country and Wave Country. Cammy said after shaking herself out of her daze. Until then, I would advise you to go to Kumo, Cammy said, receiving a nod from the woman. All right, when you see the two, tell them we said hello and give Naruto-kun a kiss from the two of us, Megami said, causing Kushina to blush before she could respond. In an instant, she was gone. After Kushina vanished, Cammy sighed and turned to face her sister, who was grinning. She said, "You know, I'm a little envious of her because she finally gets to see Naruto-kun, while we don't until later." Megami gave her a gentle smile. Cammy nodded softly when Megami said, "Don't worry, Cammy. Chan. When we do see him, we'll be able to finally tell him our true feelings for him. Until then, we can watch over them and hope we get to see him soon." However, a grim expression appeared on her face, which Megami noticed and asked, "What's wrong, Cammy? Chan?" That man, Naruto-kun, fought 3 years ago, and neither he nor the people he serves under have been heard from or seen since. "And it worries me," the goddess of life said. Megami simply laughed, and Cammy gave her a questioning glance, so she chose to explain. Megami rarely used "nay, Chan" before, so the woman looked shocked when she said, "Cammy.nay, Chan. I'm fairly certain my avatar has it under control because, even now, I'm not sure how strong Naruto-kun has become. There's nothing to be concerned about, even though we haven't heard or seen them in 3 years. However, I am aware that he is far stronger now than he was 3 years ago." With a nod from Cammy, she said, "I am confident that he will be able to defend himself and those who are important to him." Before a screen appeared and began searching for Naruto and Mito, the two swiftly snapped their fingers. Main gates of Kumo. Damn, those two insisted on bringing in more shinobi. Do they not think we'll be sufficient for this mission? Mito exaggerated her cheeks as she spoke. It's not that they don't believe in us. They just want us to be safe, Naruto said with a sly smile before laughing at her. There's nothing to worry about. Are you prepared? The girl gave him a quick nod as he spoke. The guards gave them the paperwork, and Naruto grinned before checking out. He and Mito then leapt into the woods to begin their next mission. Regretfully, they were going to have a rough time on this mission. Wave Country's border Kushina appeared in a burst of light and then collapsed to her knees from exhaustion. She took a few moments to get ready before looking around and realizing that, based on the arrangement of the trees, she was in fact between the boundaries of Wave Country and Fire Country. It wasn't shocking when she recalled this area of the forest because she still recalls her life. She then turned to face herself and was pleased to see that, aside from the orange kitsune mask on her right hip, she was dressed in typical Anbu garb. When the flood of memories from her days as an Anbu hit her, she grinned. Then, she felt a familiar tug on her left hip, and when she looked down, she saw the katana she had used in her lifetime. This one was given to her by the first Mito and her grandmother. It is not the same one that Mito used. Her clan's first katana and Uzumaki heirloom. She stretched out the kinks in her body, smiled, and patted the weapon before using her chakra sensory to detect a few chakra signatures moving into the same vicinity. When she detected Naruto's and Mito's chakra signatures, she smiled joyfully and leapt for their location. With Mito and Naruto, they increased their speed after leaving Kumo's border in order to get to their destination more quickly. In this manner, they could meet with the client and learn more about her needs. As they did so, Mito searched as far as she could for any indication of trouble using her sense of smell. At that moment, she noticed some chakra signatures moving in their direction, albeit much more slowly. I detect 6 chakra signatures 7 miles to the east of us, Naruto. Sensei. What should we do since 2 of them seem to be approaching the other 4 signatures? I was going to call Naruto sensei, because this was a mission, she said in a formal tone. Because referring to him as kun could indicate that the two were intimate and possibly in danger. Naruto scowled at this. A conflict between the individuals Mito sensed was bound to occur, but who would it be? Was the Konoha shinobi that the client's father had hired going to be involved? Or some hunter.nin battling missing.nin? With a sigh, he turned to face Mito and said, "Well, it's pretty obvious what's going to happen. Would you like to go see it in case it's the father of the client?" he said, and she gave him a tentative nod. Naruto put a hand on her shoulder after noticing the anxiety in her eyes. "I'm confident that you can handle any challenge that lies ahead of us, and if not, I'll be there, so don't worry, Mito. Chan." He smiled as he spoke. Before giving Naruto a cheek kiss, Mito's apprehension nearly instantly disappeared. With a warm smile and a slight flush, she said, "Thank you, Naruto-kun. Let's go now," she said, leaping forward. After a minute of standing there, Naruto shook his head while grinning at himself. Then he leapt after his girlfriend, apprentice. Even though she wasn't sure who it was, she could sense another tiny chakra signature coming from Mito. Somehow, the chakra felt familiar. Wave Country's riverbed. Hey, is this the extent of the great Kakashi of the Sharingan's abilities? I think it's pretty pitiful, said a 6 feet 0 inches man wearing black camouflage pants, white, gray, and black shinobi sandals. He wore forearm protectors on his arms and nothing on his chest, leaving it bare. This man, who had black eyes and black hair that spiked up in the right, was taller than he was and wielded a giant zanbato. His nose and face were covered in bandages. This man, who was currently battling Kakashi Hitaki, was Zabuza Momochi, one of the 7 legendary swordsmen of the Mist. Kakashi wasn't doing well right now. To start, his team had just crossed the Fire Country border when they were ambushed by 2 C-ranked missing nin known as the Demon Brothers. Following this, his team made the decision to proceed even though the mission had jumped past C rank and was now on the verge of B rank to A rank. Normally, he wouldn't allow low-level genin to make this decision, but one member of his team was determined to continue. After shaking his head at the thoughts, he leapt out of Zabuza's downward slash and dodged a sideways slash before being kicked in the stomach and falling into the water. "What the?" he said as he swam back up. "Does the water feel dense?" After saying that, he heard someone cackle behind him. When he turned around, it was already too late. "That's correct, haha." Zabuza uttered the words, "Suiru no Jutsu, water prison," just before water encircled Kakashi's body, enclosing him in a water sphere. Then Zabuza smirked as he looked toward the quivering bodies of Kakashi's pupils. Before performing a one-handed seal, he remarked, "Now let me show these greenhorns how a real shinobi fights." Before 4 water clones emerged from the water and pulled out their zanbatos, ready to attack their targets, he declared, "Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu." With the exception of Sai, of course, Sakura Haruno, Sai, and Sasuke Uchiha, all of Kakashi's students were uneasy about fighting this man with their sensei trapped like he was. As he recalled the night his clan was massacred by the 2 most significant individuals in his life, Sasuke clenched his teeth. He lacked the strength to stop Itachi, and was now too afraid to engage in combat with a Junin. Angry at the thought of his current weakness, he closed his eyes. The Zabuza clones were close to them before they were all submerged in water again in an instant. Zabuza was shocked by what happened in a split second and then looked around the area. "Who did that?" the man said, but that was the only sensation he had before his body collided with a Tria, or should I say, Trisa, after feeling a small indentation in his back. "Man Kakashi, you sure have gotten weak after so long. You been slacking up or something?" was said by someone as he and everyone else in the vicinity blinked in shock at what he had just witnessed. A male voice said, "Somehow, Kakashi and Sasuke thought it sounded very familiar." After dragging himself out of the tree pile he had struck, Zabuza looked up to see smoke rising from Kakashi's location. He could only make out 2 other shadowed figures in the smoke, as well as Kakashi's figure still in the water and out of the water prison. They were able to see the figures more clearly once it began to clear. However, Zabuza's eyes widened in surprise and mild fear at the sight of the taller of the 2. However, when Kakashi and Sasuke gasped at what they saw, the others gave them perplexed looks. When the smoke had completely cleared, Naruto and Mito Uzumaki Namikaze were visible, the former gazing at Kakashi's form with a slightly disappointed expression. However, Mito was laughing at every one of their looks. Naruto? Kakashi, wake up. Mito? Is that you?" Sasuke's head pricked up as he said it, curious to see if it was true. "Yeah, it's us now. Why don't you go rest up, I'll take care of this," Naruto said, grimacing as he saw Sasuke. He knew this would cause problems later. With a nod from the girl, he said, "Mito-chan, please take Kakashi away from the water and to his team." Mito then leapt away from the river while shifting Kakashi on her shoulder. Naruto then turned his head idly to see Zabuza's now walking form with the man's zanbato on his shoulder. He could see that he was smiling through the man's bandaged face mask. As he eyed Naruto's form and Zangetsu strapped onto his back, he said, "Ha ha ha. I see. You. I finally get to fight you. Ooh, this is going to be good." With a curious eyebrow raise, Naruto said, "Zabuza-san, what do you mean? For what reason would you want to fight me?" he said, causing the man to chuckle before it descended into a fit of laughter. Why? Since day one, I've secretly wanted to battle someone as good as you. I was eager to fight you at least once the day you entered the international bingo book for the most dangerous men in the elemental nations." He spoke with a tone of glee. Naruto frowned, recalling that he had done the Iwa massacre at the same time. "Oh, I see. Would you like a challenge?" Zabuza snorted at what he said. He eyed Naruto's Zanpakuto curiously and said, "No, I just want a swords duel." I know you used that weapon on your back with your confrontation with Iwa, and to at least see your fight against the weapon and the swordsman that committed such a historic event in Iwa is my dream, as is the dream of almost every other swordsman. However, Naruto simply closed his eyes before turning to face Mito and observing her anxious yet excited eyes. He turned back to Zabuza and grabbed Zangetsu's handle, causing Zabuza to twitch with excitement. He grinned at the sight of her because the girl was always excited when he fought with Zangetsu. Okay, so as long as we have a conversation after this, is that okay? The man nodded as he said that. After letting out a sigh, Naruto fully unleashed Zangetsu, revealing his partner in all his splendor. The blade itself was a swordsman's dream come true because it was the same weapon used in innumerable battles and was wielded by a master swordsman. Zabuza and the audience took in the blade's uniqueness. The blade that was reputed to be capable of eliminating a shinobi army in a single blow. However, Zabuza was more aware that the blade was somewhat different from the legendary swordsman's weapons. But he was so excited to battle such a blade and its wielder that he was giddy. There was a young hunter.nin masked shinobi up in the trees, and even though her form was hidden, she was trembling with anxiety and fear. It was both thrilling and startling to see a man of Naruto's size in front of her. She was afraid for her master's life because, if the rumors about him were accurate, this man was truly above their level. Before hearing Mito sigh, Kakashi and his group, along with an elderly man named Tizuna, gazed at the blade. They gave her a curious look, but all they saw were her dreamy eyes on Naruto's weapon. Nevertheless, Sakura and Sai secretly asked her Sensei, who is this man and who is she? When she looked at Mito at the end, she said, with a slight edge. Although Kakashi was in awe of Naruto's form, he chose to explain after hearing his student's query. He remarked regretfully, looking at Mito with sorrow as well, Sakura, this man in front of us was someone that Konoha exiled for its ignorance and discrimination towards his family. Sakura simply arched an eyebrow before continuing, but what's his name? That girl next to me is his sister, Mito Uzumaki Namikaze. His name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Kakashi said, causing Mito to stare at him for a brief moment before turning back to face the two shinobi who were prepared for battle. But Sasuke was blown away to see Naruto and Mito after all this time, and especially Naruto. Naruto are the same person who helped with his clan's massacre. Why? How? He had a lot of questions about Naruto's purpose for being here. Inquiring further, Sai asks, so why isn't he in Konoha's bingo book? Since he was exiled, shouldn't he be in the book? He said, drawing Mito's narrowed gaze. It seems that Zabuza just mentioned that Naruto wasn't just put in a regular Konoha bingo book, but rather in the International Elemental Nations bingo book, which is only accessible to the Kage, Daimyo, and Hunter.nin commanders of each village, Kakashi said with a sigh before continuing. No common Hunter.nin is permitted to fight Naruto because he is such a dangerous man. He said, drawing shocked looks from everyone but Mito, who was aware of Naruto's status and the risks it entailed. That's how dangerous Naruto is, but when I think about it, if it weren't for Konoha impudence then he wouldn't be this way, he said. Sakura said, and he's our enemy? As she turned to face this man in utter terror. She spoke in a deathly quiet voice, as opposed to the screeching voice she usually uses. Naruto. Sensei and I have no business with Konoha. We were sent here on a mission to help Free Wave Country from a tyrant named Gato, Mito said, glancing at her before continuing. Although we are not your allies, we are also not your enemies. I want to watch Naruto Sensei's fight with Zabuza.san, so please be quiet now, she said. They all gave this strange looks until they heard a clash of steel ringing through the forest. When they turned to look behind them, they saw something that would stay with them forever. With just one hand, Naruto was preventing a struggling Zabuza from completing a downward slash at him by holding Zangetsu in front of him. With a sigh, Naruto pushed Zabuza back, causing the man to skid a few feet away. Naruto then emerged behind Zabuza. Fast! The man exclaimed, his eyes wide. He managed to dodge a slash at his back by spinning around, but the ground beneath him shattered into a crater. Some onlookers were shocked by this and questioned the strength of the attack. Yes, this strength is speed. This is the man I've been wanting to fight at my fullest. Zabuza, however, had a completely different thought. He lowered his defenses and leapt back in time. He gave Naruto a quick glance before launching himself at him at full speed, leaving pictures on the water. Kakashi gasped at this action, asking, how? He muttered, he's much faster than before. However, Mito continued to watch the fight in hopes of witnessing a real conflict between swordsmen of their caliber. Despite her training in the art of Kenjutsu and her status as a Kage, she and Naruto both understood that experience would be necessary to support her claim. Thus, this was the ideal method for examining a fight between real swordsmen. When Naruto noticed his increased speed, he lifted Zangetsu just in time to block a Zabuza slash before he leapt into the air, avoiding a beheading slice from behind. He squinted when he saw that there was no movement on the water, then spun around and knocked Zabuza's attempted slash off his back. Then, using that opportunity, Naruto defeated Zangetsu by slamming it into Zabuza's own Zanbato, sending the man crashing to the ground. Naruto then plunged headfirst and hit the ground, causing yet another crater. Zabuza appeared behind him halfway into the attack, and he saw and examined his prone form before it poofed into smoke. The man went wide-eyed as Naruto suddenly materialized behind Zabuza, asking, "Is he faster?" When he felt something moving down his left arm, he looked down to see a long, red gash where blood was oozing. Like others, he widened his eyes when he did that. "Oh," he grunted again before being kicked and knocked into a tree. Before he could do anything else, he heard a thunk next to his head and snapped his eyes to look to his right, where he saw Zangetsu an inch from his head. Before his gaze returned to Naruto's walking form, Zabuza thought, he's been holding back, he beat me so easily, and yet, if he would have moved his weapon just a bit more to the left he would have killed me." He pulled Zangetsu from the tree and aimed it at Zabuza's figure as soon as the blonde, spiky-haired man appeared in front of him. "Now, Witaka," he began, but was cut off when Zabuza went limp against the tree after 3 senbon needles pierced his neck. When he saw the hunter.nin kneel in front of Zabuza's form, he narrowed his eyes. A female voice said, "Thank you for looking after him, Shinobi.san. I'll take him back to finish off the body." When Mito saw a hunter.nin, she raised an eyebrow, but she knew something was there when she saw the shinobi picking up the body. What confused her was that she saw Naruto seeing the same thing but doing nothing about it. "Well, I see. Maybe you would dispose of the body now, wouldn't you, hunter.nin, or may I say, Chan?" He smirked slyly and laughed in his head as he saw her body suddenly stiffen before vanishing in a shushin. After shaking his head, he laid Zangetsu back on his back again, the bandages encasing the blade this time. With a frustrated sigh, he turned to face the audience and said, "All right, that's over, old man." To get Tazuna's attention, he said, "Take us to your house. If our suspicions are right, our client is actually your daughter, so we might as well take the 2 of us, okay?" He spoke in a more formal manner. "You. Sure," he stammered and then led them forward, Mito walking next to him and Naruto hefting up Kakashi, while Kakashi's team followed, their minds racing with questions. 5 minutes later, Kushina emerged with an angry huff. "Damn it. I simply didn't see them." She said this before scanning the area. She closed her eyes and felt the energies present, smiling when she sensed Mito's and Naruto's. "However, I feel close to Mito. Chan and Naruto.kun based on their energy." She uttered those words before leaping off in their direction. A few of the group were wondering what to do with their current circumstances as they walked down a dirt road that led to Tazuna's house. 2 of them knew nothing about the strange but now deadly man carrying one of their sensei while he was unconscious. Second, because of the confrontation with both the demon brothers and the A-ranked Nuke.nin Zabuza Momochi, the demon of the mist, their now exposed C-rank mission was likely elevated from a low B rank to an A rank. However, since they witnessed him die, they had no reason to be concerned. Finally, what are their options in this case? They knew none of them could stand up to this man in front of them, and they had no way of getting in touch with Konoha for reinforcements. Nobody knew this better than Sasuke. With the exception of Sasuke's covert plan to talk to Naruto, they simply agreed to wait for their sensei to awaken so they could await his instructions regarding their next course of action. Sasuke was staring at Naruto's form with bewilderment, hurt, betrayal, and most of all rage as they followed Tazuna. Anger at the extermination of his clan after Naruto raised him since he was a child. Betrayal by killing his clansmen and assisting Itachi in carrying out the act. Confusion about why Naruto assisted in his clan's massacre, and hurt at not being told why or any explanation for his involvement. Back then, he still regarded Naruto as a big brother who looked out for him in times of need. However, the atrocity involving his clan and the 2 individuals involved left him perplexed as to why they committed it and how he ought to respond to it. Silently observing the internal struggle in Sasuke's eyes, Naruto could tell he was struggling simply by being in his presence. He couldn't hold it against him after rumors circulated that he had been involved in the clan massacre. He let out a sorrowful sigh. Would he have to betray Hitomi's trust and reveal the truth to Sasuke? Or simply wait for this mission to be completed so you can avoid Sasuke before he begins to question you? He smiled reassuringly and shook his head when he saw Mito's worried expression on him, but something in the back of his mind told him something was wrong with Sasuke. He wasn't sure what it was, but it was something like an illusion, similar to what Hitomi had on her when he first learned the truth about her. He narrowed his eyes suspiciously, wondering if what he was recalling was accurate at the moment or if he was overanalyzing it. After that, Sasuke was actually Naruto. Sensei? He looked at her curiously after Mito's words jolted him out of his daze. Yes, Mito. Chan, what is it? He asked. He said. Mito simply sighed and gestured in front of them. They were all standing in front of a small, two-story cabin when he turned around. He started to perspire a little as Tazuna approached the door. How much time did I spend thinking? They waited at the front door after following Tazuna. Tsunami, I'm home, come open the door, Tazuna said as she knocked on the door. Before the wooden door exploded open, he heard several unlocking noises and a brief stepping sound coming from behind it. When it finally opened, Naruto's eyes widened slightly. The woman in front of them was stunning. She appeared to be in her early to mid-20s and was 5 feet 6 inches tall, with a blue blouse that showed off most of her body. He noticed that she had a heart-shaped face and long, dark blue hair. When he looked into her eyes, he saw a friendly, inviting black. Hello miss, I know you have questions, but would you mind if we came in? He said with a smile. This guy isn't light after all, so you've got to get him in a room or something, he said uneasily. Tsunami merely gave him a glance before grinning broadly. She said, of course please do come in, I have tea almost ready, but when she looked at Naruto, her face had a faint pink tint, even though no one could see it. They gave a nod, and Tazuna led them as they entered. A small child on the stairs was observing them all with a puzzled yet defeated expression as Mito and Naruto were doing this. Mito became alarmed by this and turned to face Naruto, who had a somber expression on his face. Naruto walked out of Kakashi's room after putting him in a futon, only to run into Sasuke. They maintained eye contact until Naruto heard Sasuke say a single word. Why? He flinched in his head because Sasuke wasn't supposed to see him again for a while, but this mission simply brings him and Sasuke together again. Could it be that Kami is deceiving him? He let out a sigh and considered his options. Should he betray Hitomi's trust and tell Sasuke the truth? Or tell a lie and avoid talking to the boy at all? He said, returning his focus to Sasuke. Before leaving, he remarked, Sasuke, if you are seeking answers, we will talk later, especially from prying ears. Sasuke simply remained motionless, his mind racing with the absurd number of questions. He then reacted to what Naruto had just said and followed him silently down the stairs as he considered his next course of action. When they arrived at the first floor, Mito noticed them and approached Naruto, asking, what should we do now, Naruto? Sensei. She said, a little unsure of what to do, the situation is a bit complicated. With a hesitant nod from Sakura, Naruto turned to face the final two of Kakashi's students and said, well, Mito and I don't have jurisdiction with Konoha, so you don't have to follow my orders, but I would highly suggest you follow my advice and wait for Kakashi to wake up before you do anything else. Sai simply smiled and said, very well. Naruto gazed at the boy while pondering in his head. This boy reminds me too much of Danzo's old friends. However, the man was taken into custody, so how could a root be present? Perhaps I'm overanalyzing things, but I'd better watch him closely just in case. All right, Tsunami-san. Yes, he said, grabbing the woman's attention. She inquired as to what she and many other women believed the blonde Adonis needed. We need to talk more in detail about the mission you asked Kumo for, if that's okay with you, he said with a smile and a gesture outside. When he said that, she nodded and her eyes widened. Following Naruto, Mito, and Tsunami's departure, Team 7 was left alone. Sakura, in her fangirl mode, turned to face Sasuke and said, Sasuke-kun, what should we do? Wondering what was on her crush's mind. Ignoring Sakura the entire time, Sasuke simply closed his eyes and said, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to listen to the guy's advice and stay put till Kakashi Sensei wakes up, then we plan our next move. He then snapped his eyes open and said, but be on guard, we don't know them, so watch your backs. His tone was unusually serious. For a worried Uchiha like him to be like he is now, they noticed his more rigid posture, and even Sakura, an untrained civilian, knew to follow what he said, is really concerning. To say that Naruto and Mito were a little repulsed by Tsunami's explanation of everything outside would be an understatement. While Mito was shaking with rage and tears streaming from her eyes, Naruto appeared emotionless and stoic, but he was secretly plotting how to track down Gato and kill the pig-headed fool in the most agonizing ways possible. What they heard would shatter any mortal. This Gato has been in charge of Wave Country for years. The crook has been extorting money from everyone in Wave and employing thugs and bandits to maintain control. What's worse is that if they are unable to provide the money, Gato will take anything else, like your home, food, or life. In addition, he removes the women from the streets, uses them as sex slaves, as Tsunami describes them, and disappears. She also described how Kaiza was a national hero and what he accomplished for the populace, including opposing Gato and his men only to be tortured and then put to death in front of everyone. It is particularly painful because Inari viewed Kaiza as a father figure. Ever since that day, the town has lost all hope. I know the money wasn't much and the rank is higher than it should be, which is why I asked for help, but please, please, she fell to her knees and pleaded. Assist us. Mito instantly knelt down and gave the woman a hug, comforting her as best she could as she spoke, tears streaming down her face. She actually recoiled a little when she saw Naruto because of the aura he was giving off. If there was anything she knew Naruto detested, it was men like Gato, who he believed to be nothing more than scum and trash unfit for the living world. Additionally, the aura he was giving off demonstrated how hard he was fighting the urge to track down the man and slowly and painfully kill him. The sobbing woman heard Naruto say, "Tsunami-san," in a whisper, but she looked up to see his warm smile and eyes, which reassured her that everything would be alright. There is nothing to worry about, the pay doesn't concern me. Hell, you can keep it, Naruto said. My top priority right now is what happened in Wave. We will take care of Gato and his men. There won't be anything left after we find him. That is a promise, and Mito and I always keep our promise, he stated confidently and firmly. Before she embraced Naruto and wept in his chest, Tsunami's eyes began to water even more. Thank you, thank you, thank you, she said again. Mito-chan, we are going to need to scout out the area to make sure it is safe around. After this we plan our next move afterwards, Naruto said, glancing at Mito. He addressed his pupil. Mito simply replied, Hi Naruto. Sensei, she said. All right, Tsunami-san. Softly, he inquired. As much as I like having such a beautiful woman like you in my arms, the woman said, smirking as she slowly stopped crying and raised her head to look at him inquiringly. The woman blushed at his compliment. I think it would be better you get back inside. Tazuna and Inari might get worried. She nodded and eeped as she leapt from his arms and ran into the house. After she left, Naruto turned to Mito and said, Mito-chan, we're going to have to figure out what to do next. He said, receiving a nod from Mito. It would appear from Tsunami-san's explanation that Gato rules with fear and uses his fear men to instill this fear. Remember my fight with Zabuza and the moment he died. Also, seeing someone like Gato shows me how desperate Gato is, so Tazuna dies. He said, receiving a perplexed nod from Mito, who was now thinking about something. Now that she was realizing what he was going to say, he grinned to himself. The scene appeared too suspicious when the red-haired teen gave it some thought. For starters, despite his weakness, Zabuza was still an ex-Anbu and one of the legendary swordsmen. She thought it was odd to be caught and killed so easily, but shinobi always pick the right moment to attack their adversaries when they are most vulnerable. However, the way the alleged Hunter.nin handled the matter really disturbed her. In contrast to how typical Hunter.nin followed protocol, this one took the body with her. He's alive, she muttered as realization dawned on her face. Naruto heard her and frowned as he nodded. That's right, and even now if he's alive I'd say we have a week before he and his accomplice come back to kill Tazuna. He said, receiving a nod from Mito. Until then, we will train and protect Tazuna and his family from any dangers Gato might send. Naruto knew the girl was crying because of what she had heard, so he gave her a gentle smile before approaching Mito. He pulled her into his chest and gave her a gentle hug. He uttered the words, now, Mito-chan, there is no need to hold it back, there is no reason to hold back the tears. And the girl responded instantly. She sobbed as she pressed her face further into his chest. She was devastated by what she heard and harbored a deep hatred for Gato, but her feelings were mostly sorrow for Wave and the suffering endured by its people. The terror of having their family taken or the women used in such a manner. The horrors they always had to endure. Additionally, the man's actions to maintain control over a nation infuriated her to the point where she wanted to murder him. Naruto supported her while she expressed her feelings. He couldn't hold it against her because he was suppressing his own emotions in order to keep Gato and his men from being utterly destroyed. He let out a sigh as he remembered Zabuza and the Hunter.nin, the two people he needed to talk to. When he looked down after noticing a faint snore, he saw that Mito had fallen asleep in his arms and was crying. He scowled because he never liked it when she cried. Sure, everyone's tears bring sadness or emotional distress, but when she or those close to him cried, he felt hurt. Someone who stands in his way dies when something inside of him snaps. He sadly sighs as he runs a hand through her hair. He really didn't want Mito to live this kind of life, but the girl was determined to be a shinobi in spite of their lethal and perilous way of life. Since he was the primary trainer, he knew it was her decision and wouldn't stop her, even though he didn't think she would become a shinobi. However, he would stop at nothing to protect her from anyone who might try to harm her. Among them is the now rumored Akatsuki. With another sigh, he sent a cage bushin to take her to his room, which was also technically hers. He narrowed his eyes as he saw something familiar in the woods and felt as though someone was observing him. He couldn't place it, but the feeling felt very familiar, even though he didn't know what it was or who it was. After shaking his head, Naruto returned to the house because he had other concerns. Kushina sensed Mito and Naruto's energy inside the house after finally getting close enough to them and considering her options. What am I going to do? Simply enter the house and say, "Hey, I'm looking for Naruto and Mito. They're my children, and I've come back from the dead to say hello." PFT. Yes, exactly. Well, I'll wait a little while longer before determining when the time is appropriate. Kushina then leapt farther into the forest to begin waiting out the days before she went to talk to Mito and Naruto. A shimmer emerged after she left, followed by a floating green slitted eyeball that briefly appeared and then vanished as well. Tomorrow, to be clear, Zabuza is still alive, and by the end of the week, we will be practicing how to defend against his attack. Are you telling us that, Sensei? Sakura uttered those words while wearing a terrified expression. Though Sasuke and Sai were opposites of her and had different opinions, this only caused the now healed Hitaki to nod in agreement with her fears. Well, Hitaki, if that is all you were going to say, then I would suggest you get to training your students, or are you going to laze around another day? Naruto said after taking everything Kakashi had said in stride. He raised an eyebrow and said, Kakashi just flinched at the jab because it was true that he was lazy. He replied, yes, we will start today. Sakura asked him if he would be alright, but he dismissed her worries. Naruto simply turned around and gave Mito a shoulder pat. She looked up at him, and he grinned, saying, well, I suppose we have our own training to get to then, huh? Mito gave him a gentle smile as he said that. After observing the exchange, Kakashi said, well, I'm going to teach them tree walking. Would you like to join? I thought Mito should learn it too, he said. No, actually Kakashi Mito Chan already knows tree walking and other such training exercises. I have something else in mind. Mito snapped her head at Kakashi as if he were crazy, while Naruto simply snorted. He used the word other to imply that he didn't want the other genin to know what Kakashi was going to tell them. But when Kakashi realized, his eyes widened, and he scolded himself in his head for being such a fool. Given that Naruto had taught her the chakra control exercises since she was a young child, Mito would undoubtedly be aware of them. Right now, he felt like a complete moron. He escorted Mito out of the house, saying, now if you will excuse us, we have training to do. Kakashi got up as well, saying, well, shall we go? We have a time limit here, he said, cutting off Sakura's questioning, adding that he didn't feel like responding to her at the moment, particularly when Sai is present. Good, they're gone. Now I can guard this place, as boss said, without having to worry about any of them looking for ways to make me go poof, a clone of Naruto said after they had left, before vanishing back into the shadows. With that, every shinobi got ready for the impending confrontation with Zabuza and his partner. Unknown place. Ow. As Haku removed the needles from his neck, Zabuza yelled. It was really painful from the pain of the induced death-like state that Haku put him in. It felt like he had gone through 3 rounds with the Rokubi. However, he was extremely excited about the prospect of facing Naruto again. Haku told him to stay still, Zabuza-sama. He disregarded this advice and thought about how he should approach the blonde again since it was inevitable. Should he fight to the best of his abilities or do something else? Hey, you are a pathetic baby demon. A group of shinobi handed him his ass, a pig-like voice said, causing Zabuza to narrow his eyes. Haku turned around to see their employer Gato, a small man, standing behind him with his 2 bodyguards. The overweight man went a little farther and tried to seize Zabuza, but Haku's iron-like grip grabbed his hand as he spoke. Before Gato began to scream when his arms were officially broken, a chill began to creep into the room, making him and his bodyguards shiver. Don't you lay your filthy hands on Zabuza-sama, or you will die, she said. Ahhhh. As he glared at his 2 hired shinobi through his orange-tinted glasses, he yelled and pulled his now broken left arm. Why? You had better do it correctly this time. He stumbled out the door as the 2 terrified samurai fled in tow, unwilling to be killed, and said, or so help me, you can consider our deal broken and let you 2 be killed by the hunter. Nins. With a sigh, Haku turned to face her. Master. Haku. That wasn't necessary, he said, removing a kunai from beneath his bed. Sorry, Zabuza. Sama, but I can't let you be hurt, she said, keeping her head down. However, Zabuza's eyes soften as she looks at the floor. He recalled the desired conversation with Naruto and thought, don't worry, Haku. We will soon find a better life than this. We will soon find a life where we won't have to look over our shoulder anymore. Halfway through the week, Mito exclaimed, Huff, 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 Naruto. Sensei, I got it down. She was so tired that all she could see around her were craters and destroyed trees. With a warm smile and a nod of approval, Naruto gave the weary Mito a sense of security and warmth. Very good, Mito-chan. All you need to do now is perfect it and master it completely, and you'll have it under control. Other than that, I'm proud of you because you mastered it much faster than I did, he said proudly. He assisted her in learning and mastering the Rasengan during their training period in Wave. Since the orb was merely an empty shell of highly condensed chakra, it would appear that Minato was attempting to figure out how to add his affinity in the Rasengan. In order to surpass her 2.Sen in the Rasengan, Mito wanted to fully master the jutsu because it was still lacking. Despite this, Naruto continued to train in secret in a pocketable dimension he had created for himself whenever he had free time throughout the days, in order to prevent his training from disturbing the others or destroying the training forest. However, Naruto and Sasuke had a fascinating conversation over the past few days that revealed more secrets than one. Flashback from a day ago, either of them was waiting for the other to say something, so they stared at each other in tense silence. Thankfully, Sasuke was the first to ask, Why? Why? Did you do it? In a whisper. Despite being able to hear him clearly, Naruto closed his eyes and waited for Sasuke to release his hold. Why, Naruto, why did you do it? Even though he never noticed the slight shimmer in his form or the fluctuation of his chakra pathways, Sasuke said indignantly. However, Naruto hardened his eyes upon seeing it, considered his options, and took action. Why? Sasuke, are you implying something about me? He spoke in such a naive way, but Sasuke became even angrier. You know damn well what I'm talking about, he said. You contributed to the complete slaughter of my clan. As Sasuke's chakra became even more unmanageable and his form began to tremble even more, he uttered those words. Although Sasuke's words made Naruto cringe in his mind, his attention was now more on what was happening to Sasuke's form. It was needed. Sasuke, the Uchiha clan, was growing arrogant, he said casually, as if discussing the weather, with a sigh as he made the final push. Sasuke snapped at that. Ah. Fuck you. Sasuke shouted before charging at Naruto with a kunai drawn. Naruto swiftly came to his side and gave the furious Uchiha a quick chop to the neck, knocking him out. Following this, he made a few basic hand gestures, putting the last one in a tora before placing his heads on Sasuke's forehead, where a seal materialized. Before Sasuke's form burst into smoke and revealed a completely different person, he said, Kai. People who knew Makoto would assume that the girl was her sister or twin because of her long, raven hair that reached her back and her developing heart-shaped face. Although it didn't cover up his expanding bust, she wore what Sasuke was wearing. Naruto was correct, and his eyes narrowed in rage. Only the head and elders of the Uchiha clan had such a seal, and this was the real Sasuke. Who saw it? In an emergency when a clan was in danger of going extinct, the seal was used to transform a male into a female or vice versa, as was the case with Sasuke. However, he used it on his own second daughter. He lay the newly female Sasuke on the ground and waited for the newly revealed girl to awaken after snarling and cursing Fugaku to the depths of hell. The girl began to stir a few minutes later, and when she opened her eyes slowly, she saw the same black coal that Uchiha had. Before the girl could say or do anything, he said, Sasuke. Sit down. What I did just now actually helped you. If you look at yourself you would have at least an idea of what I speak of. He could see that they went from confusion to anger when she saw him. The girl gave him a perplexed look. Naruto plugged his ears for the inevitable as she examined herself and then froze. Ah. I don't know what happened to me. Good thing Naruto had his ears plugged or he would be suffering from a terrible headache right now, she yelled. Well, now that you have that out of your system, I suppose I can explain myself to you, and of how you're a female, so don't try to attack me till I'm done. Okay? Naruto said after waiting for the raven-haired Uchiha to calm down. He saw her sit down and stare at the ground in shock. He said, and the girl just gave him a confused, angry look. She nodded her head shakily, curious to know what was happening. With a sigh, Naruto acknowledged that he would be betraying his pledge to Hitomi, but he had no choice but to accept this as the proper resolution. What I'm about to tell you is all true, and you can say I'm telling lies, but every single thing I speak of is true down to the last word," he said, staring into the girl's coal-black eyes until she flinched. He explained everything, including the truth about Itachi's true gender, the orders from Sarutobi, Kaharu, Homura, and Danzo, as well as the usurpers in the Uchiha clan who were plotting a coup. He also described how he and Hitomi actually rescued Makoto and other innocent people. "How come you're a girl? I would say that Fugaku didn't want another daughter, so he conspired with the elders to take you away from Makoto and have you sealed at birth to make you a male Uchiha. When Makoto's guard was down, he said, it's likely that she had a memory displacement seal put on her." He turned to see the female Uchiha staring at him emotionlessly. He sighed as he noticed her eyes begin to sparkle and approached her, stroking her head and tousling her hair as he had done when she was younger. "You probably need time to think on everything I've said, but it's all true," he said, smiling slightly as she slowly looked up at him while tears were streaming down her face. "Makoto is still alive," he said, adding, "Itachi is actually Hitomi, and the so-called massacre of the Uchiha clan wasn't a massacre at all." The girl simply stared thoughtfully at the ground. She recalled the final words Hitomi said to her that evening. "Now that I think about it, things were getting tense back then between 2.San and Itachi, and from the things Naruto told me, it's starting to fit." Hitomi said, "I'm doing this to protect those important to me." When she finally realized that her father, her clan, the elders, and the higher-ups of Konoha had everything planned out, she dropped her head. Then she felt a pair of arms envelop her, and when she looked up, she saw Naruto smiling warmly at her. She remained motionless in his arms until he said the few words that finally broke the last emotional barrier. In a gentle yet melancholy tone, he said, "Go on. Let it out. No need to hide your pain anymore." She did just that, slamming into his chest and sobbing in his arms as he remained there, trying to calm the sobbing girl. She eventually withdrew, sniffling a little, and then rubbed her eyes so she wouldn't display any more weakness in front of Naruto. He simply grinned and ruffled her hair, which caused her to look at him in confusion. The girl gave a little twitch of her lips before a small smile appeared on her face as he said, You know I don't like it when a girl cries. Especially someone that's important to me, so come on, smile." He nodded and got up, saying, "Good, now why don't we go back? I think you need rest so you can get control over everything I've told you." To which she nodded. That day, they walked back to the house, even though the girl was much closer to Naruto than the spiky-haired Shinigami would ever realize. The end of the flashback. Since then, Sasuke had not changed much in front of Kakashi, Sakura, or Sai, but she would break through the henge she had put on herself around Naruto and Mito so the others wouldn't be suspicious. She chose to call herself Sayuri when she was in her true form, and she also acts so different around the two, smiling more and being more open, especially around Naruto, which Mito finds a little suspicious and would discuss with her later. After dismissing his recent thoughts, Naruto approached Mito and put his hand on her shoulder. His hand glowed green for a minute before Mito's body glowed green as well. She let out a sigh of relief as the pain and soreness subsided, but she was definitely exhausted. He said, "Mito-chan, why don't you go back inside and rest? You deserve it after all the training today." She nodded and smiled before getting up to leave, but she stumbled and was on the verge of falling. She fell into a pair of powerful arms and looked up to see Naruto smirking at her as he led her away from the ground. "Now you're okay?" he asked, his smirk turning into a worried expression. She nodded again, nervously scratching her head. He looked into her violet eyes and smiled softly, then closed in on her face. Before she knew it, their lips were locked in a chastised kiss, and she closed her eyes and joined in, which lasted for a few minutes before they parted for air. Mito's face looked like a cherry, while Naruto's smile had a slight flush as well. "I need you to carry Mito-chan back at the house. She needs her rest," he said, looking at the clone. The clone didn't need to hear anything else and nodded. He laughed, then kissed her forehead, making her look at him again. He then smiled and snapped his fingers, and a cage bushin appeared in a puff of smoke. "Wait, Naruto-kun, what about you? Aren't gonna come back to the house?" she asked, curious about what her sensei boyfriend was doing. Naruto simply gave her a teasing grin that looked a lot like the ones she had seen Kakashi give his students, saying, "Yes, I will be there in a little while, but first I want to try something I've been working on, so go ahead and then you can use me as the big teddy bear at night all you want." Mito simply flushed red and buried her face into the clone's chest. They both looked at each other, amused, and the clone fled into the forest toward Tezuna's house. He waited a few more seconds before a shadowed figure emerged from the trees. He could not see much, but he knew it was female from the curves the shadow gave out. He narrowed his eyes, He had sensed this figure watching him for a long time ever since they arrived at Dazuna's, and for some reason the feeling this person gave off was so familiar to him. Naruto's body went rigid and prepared for battle. His head was low, his bangs shadowed his eyes. He looked into a section of the forest and said, "Come out. And quit your hiding, there is no point to it anymore." The voice that said, "I see. You've gotten quite good at sensing people." Naruto. Startled Naruto so much that he would never be able to forget the voice of the one woman he loved and respected above all others. "It. Can't be," he said, but was cut off when the figure continued to move until it revealed the figure of Kushina Uzumaki, who was smiling sorrowfully as tears streamed down her lovely face. "Yes, I'm here, Naruto. I'm back," she said, and Naruto simply stood motionless, his gaze fixed on Kushina's face as he searched for the least amount of dishonesty possible. "No. How? Are you here? I saw you die. I know you died. How?" he said, placing a hand over his face to conceal his eyes. Kushina saw this and sighed pitifully, knowing that this would be difficult to explain. "Well, since we're alone, I'll tell you Kami and Megami," she started, causing Naruto to tense at both of their names when she saw them. 3 years ago, they asked if I wanted another chance at life, and I said yes. Kami gave me this chance, but this time, she came back because Kami needed time to sort things out before I could come back, she said, causing Naruto's eyes to widen behind his palm at the startling revelation. "Kami, did you bring her back?" He calmed himself, stood up straighter, and opened his eyes to look into Kushina's own violet eyes, which were the same warm violet Mito had. He would have asked about Minato, but he knew what had happened to the man and that using the Shikifuin has consequences that not even Kami or Megami could bend or break. As he gestured to his position and the fact that he had technically died, he said, "I see, then I assume you know of what happened to me then?" Kushina nodded sadly, her eyes drooping to the ground in sorrow. "Yes, I know. You no longer my Sochi. You really aren't my or Minato's son anymore," she said, her own eyes welling with tears. Naruto frowned as he watched Kushina sob. She had been his mother when he was alive, but now he was just Naruto the Shinigami and the avatar of the goddess of death. When he approached Kushina, he put his arms around her quivering body and pulled her into a warm embrace. In the instant that followed, Kushina put her arms around him and sobbed into his shoulder, and he simply stood there with her in his arms, running a hand through her red hair, and he couldn't help but smile while shedding a tear. "Kami-chan. Many thanks." They remained there for a few minutes before Kushina gained control of herself, stopped crying, and simply remained in Naruto's warm embrace, secretly enjoying his arms. Since he was a head taller than Kushina, Naruto inadvertently rested his head on top of hers and sighed, saying, "It's good to have you back, Kushina. It truly is." While the redhead sighed happily and smiled softly at his words before remembering Mito, she slowly withdrew and gazed into Naruto's bewildered eyes. "Anyo. Naruto-kun?" she asked, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow in his mind at the last part of his name. "Yes, Kushina. Chan, what is it?" he asked. In an attempt to find the simplest way to let Mito know how she's doing, she said, "What do we tell her? I'm pretty sure she doesn't know all about your true self. She may know something, but she doesn't know everything. I guess we tell her the whole truth. I trust Mito-chan with my life, and I love her," Naruto said, sighing and considering it for a brief moment before smiling. "In addition, I am beginning to see flashes of her in Shinigami attire, and her sword is changing as well, so she was bound to find out soon." Kushina's eyes widened before turning into a playful, teasing violet. She smiled teasingly and said, "Ooh, I see you fell in love with Mito, huh?" Naruto blushed a little before choosing to play her little game. "Yeah, I did, but then again you are just like I remember the same fiery-tempered red-headed beautiful woman I remember," he said with a smile, but Kushina just blushes blood red at his compliment and finds the ground fascinating. Naruto just laughs at being able to defeat Kushina at her own game. He calms down a little and gives her a one-armed hug, lifting her by the chin gently and looking into her eyes. "About Mito-chan, how about you two meet tomorrow? I'll make sure this time Mito gets to meet the one person that brought her into this world," he said, and she gratefully smiled at him before kissing his cheek, surprising him by blushing a little. "Thank you for giving me this chance. I've been dying to see her, and you as well, Naruto-kun," she said, laughing at his action and grabbing his hand tightly. Naruto simply tightened his own hand around hers before pointing to the Tazuna's house. He got her to nod and smile before Naruto could question why she was smiling. "Then tomorrow then, come by Tazuna's house in the morning, I'll be outside waiting for you, then I'll introduce you to Mito, okay?" he said. She pulled him completely down until she was face to face with him, and just before he could say anything, Kushina's lips touched his own in a brief kiss that revealed the love that was there for him. Naruto remained frozen in shock, and even after she released him, he stood there looking blank but dazed. She looked into his eyes and said, "That's from Kami, Chan and Megami. Chan," and he turned around and staggered to Tazuna's house in a daze. Kushina simply giggled at his reaction before blushing scarlet red when she saw what he looked like. She shivered when she recalled being in his embrace and feeling her body brush against his body, saying, "Kami. Now that I look at him, he's totally different than what he looked like 3 years ago." Kushina shook her head, though, and moved a little further into the forest in anticipation of seeing Mito again the following morning. He returned to Naruto's room to find everyone else asleep, spotted a plate for himself with a note from Tsunami on the table, grinned appreciatively, and ate quietly before going to the sink to wash his dirty dishes, drying his hands with a towel, and putting the clean and dry dishes away before going upstairs to his and Mito's room, where he quietly opened the door to find Mito sleeping soundly and a small fox kit lying between his and her futon before undressing and settling into his own futon. His eyes began to go a little dazed, and he gave Akira and Mito a good night kiss before falling asleep with the two in his arms. He then carefully picked up the fox kit, which he called Kyubi, or, as he prefers to call her, Akira, and put her in Mito's arms before giving them a protective hug. The following morning at the appointed time, Kushina showed up in front of Tazuna's house, and to her delight, Naruto was outside. He gave her a sincere smile and motioned her inside in a low voice, and she nodded and followed him inside. As they did so, Kushina saw that Naruto was wearing only a black muscle shirt and black sweatpants, and she naturally blushed when she saw his muscular chest. However, she shook her head when they arrived at a particular room. Kushina, however, had her eyes on Mito's sleeping form and had to cover her mouth to prevent a gasp. "By Kami. She looks just like me," she whispered, but when she heard a chuckle, she turned to see Naruto laughing at her. Naruto grabbed the doorknob and opened the door, and Kushina hurried in with him, closing it behind them. She gave him a half-hearted glare before giving him a light head slap, which caused Naruto to pout a little. "Well, of course she would be after all. I was born like a carbon copy of Minato, so it's only natural for the daughter to look almost identical to the mother," he said with a smile. When she approached Mito's sleeping form and felt the fox kit in her arm, her eyes widened. She glanced at Naruto and saw a slight nod of confirmation. "Yes, it's Kyubi, but I'll explain later," he said. She nodded and then turned to face Mito, who was sleeping, brushing back a stray hair before whispering in her ear. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Masumi," she said, causing Mito to react slightly. She moaned and bit her right hand while rubbing her right eye, opening her eyes blearily to see only a red blur in front of her. As it began to clear up, she turned to face a blonde man in front of her futon. She looked at her side and saw a gorgeous red-headed woman, and when it became clear that the blonde man was actually Naruto, she scowled and asked herself why he was grinning so pitifully at her. She froze in disbelief that this woman was the same one in the childhood photos Naruto had shown her of her parents. She said, "K.Ka.San," before rubbing her eyes frantically to make sure she wasn't seeing things. Kushina, however, smirked at her behavior and knew Mito undoubtedly inherited her attitude from her. Mito snapped her head at Naruto again after stopping her eye rub and saying, "N. Naruto.kun. I.is she." She simply received a nod from Naruto, and before Kushina knew it, she was tackled by a red blur that resembled a missile, knocking her to the ground while Akira rolled on the floor and woke up to a startling scene. She slowly stopped up on her paws and walked over to Naruto, pulling on his leg as he looked down and smirked at the fox pout Akira puts up in her current form. He picked her up and placed her on his head before placing a silencing and locking seal within the room. He then walked up to the hugging pair and sat down, waiting for them both to calm down. Her former container was alive, and being hugged to death by her third container while Naruto was observing the scene with a slight smile. After a few minutes, Mito withdrew from San's embrace and turned to face Naruto, who had red, puffy eyes. "N. Naruto.kun. How is she? Here?" she asked, since Naruto had informed her that she had died at birth. Naruto simply glanced at Kushina, and after receiving a nod of approval from her, he sighed and said, looking directly into Mito's eyes. "Well, Mito-chan, how she's alive goes back during your birth." Naruto then told the one girl he trusted the most about everything, including the day of her birth, his actual death, and his new life as Megami's avatar. As a result, he became a little anxious when he noticed her staring at him blankly. "Since the day I was born, you've been the embodiment of what you would have looked like if you were alive. You gave up your life to give Ka-san more time with me when I was a newborn, and in return, you met Megami, the goddess of death, who offered you a deal to become her avatar and return to life. After that, you returned to the living world and took me away before Sarutobi could do anything like take me away from you. Now, I see that you haven't been my brother in blood for a long time because you sacrificed your humanity. With your relationship with the goddess of death, you met the goddess of life, Megami's sister Kami, which gave Ka-san here another chance to live. Did I hear this all right? With a huge smile that threatened to split her face, Mito said, in that case I can do this. Before pushing Kushina to Naruto from behind. The blonde Shinigami was too shocked to react and ended up falling to the ground, with Kushina falling with him with their lips still connected. Akira, who was safely picked up by Mito during the action, was smiling a fox-like grin that mimicked Mito's own. The kissing couple remained motionless, blushing on both of their faces, and then they parted ways so fast that the Hiraishin would have appeared sluggish in contrast. When they turned their heads in response to the sound of laughter, they noticed that Akira was practically rolling on the ground with laughter, while Mito was sitting there with a very innocent smile and her shoulders shaking from suppressing her laughter. Mito-chan, why did you do that? Naruto asked, wondering why Mito would do that, and Kushina asked the same thing, loving the kissing sensation. Mito simply gave him a deadpan look and said, Naruto-kun, I'm not stupid, I can see how much you love Ka-san. You might not have noticed, but I have seen you look at her pictures at times. I know you love her, Naruto-kun, with a teasing grin. Naruto's face turned completely red, turning away from the two complaining about smart-ass girlfriends and their perverse sense of humor. But Kushina's eyes were wide as she gazed at Naruto. Has he really? Is that true, and Naruto-kun? She inquired, and Naruto at once thought the ceiling was fascinating. However, he sighed after a short while and concluded he couldn't conceal it indefinitely. He glanced at Mito and saw her nod contentedly, then turned back to Kushina and said, I'm willing to give a new relationship a try. As friends. Yeah. I guess I do. I just didn't know what these feelings were. I mean, you were the one that brought me into this world. That was before I died, but I just see you more than a someone like me should. I'm not your son anymore by biological means and most definitely aren't a Namikaze either. Or maybe more, Mito grinned, causing Naruto to flush and Kushina to laugh. However, the red-haired woman grinned at Naruto, moved closer to him, and drew Mito to her side while holding Akira in her lap. The three of them widened their eyes at her as she said, well, then, I guess we'll be rebuilding the Uzumaki clan together, huh? Mito appeared to be a deep red tomato, and Naruto's face flushed a deep scarlet. But Akira silently thanked her fur for being that color, or else they would have all seen her as a crimson-looking fox kit. Although she couldn't wait to see them again, Kushina couldn't wait for that moment either, as she laughed at their responses. Before getting up, Naruto gave a small shake of his head. Well, we still have a couple more hours to sleep before everyone else gets up, so want to catch a bit more sleep? He asked, and each person nodded. The two red heads used his chest as a pillow, wrapping their arms around him while his own were over their bodes, drawing them closer to him. Naruto then pushed the two futons together and lay in the center, with Mito on his right, Kushina on his left, and Akira in her fox.kit form dozing on his chest. In order to avoid learning that Kushina was still alive, they slept in that position for a few more hours before waking up and waiting for Kakashi and his group to depart before departing as well. Although they kept it to themselves, they felt that this was the greatest moment of their lives. All they needed was that moment of being together. In Wave Country's forest, the day before the battle, Zabuza looked incredulously at Naruto's shadowed form, while Haku was in a defensive stance, prepared to shield him from a potential enemy. So let me get this straight, you're giving me and Haku a chance to join your personal squadron in the Fire Daimyo's army, only if we leave Tazuna and his family alone and help you kill Gato and his thugs? Zabuza asked. Zabuza's eyes narrowed even more when Naruto laughed and said, yes, it may seem too easy on your part, and wondered what the catch was. Well, there is none. You see, I'm looking for shinobi like you and Haku-san here to join my specialized squad in Iroh-sama's army. Inquiring about what this living legend would do, he said, and do pray tell what you will do with the hunter.nin from Kiri that are tracking us. Naruto simply raised an eyebrow at him before laughing, saying, I already got that straightened out, for you see, if you accept my offer, all your transgressions against Kiri will be erased from your profile and have a clean slate, while Haku here already has a clean due to not really being a shinobi, only your apprentice. So, what do you say, Zabuza-san? Very well, on one condition though, you and I have a dual kenjutsu only, no ninjutsu, genjutsu or any other shinobi skill allowed, only full-out Kenjutsu. Sabusa thought for a moment, then glanced at Haku before turning back to Naruto with a smile. I want to fight you at my fullest with my sword against yours. Naruto simply nodded and smiled at him, and the deal was made. It seems that Kakashi learned that she was alive when he unintentionally entered Naruto's room and discovered Kushina there of all things. Let's say that things got heated, but Naruto stopped Kakashi from doing anything and told him to keep her existence a secret for a little while longer. The man was skeptical at first, but eventually agreed, and Kushina was welcomed into the family. She usually assisted with Tsunami or Mito's training after that. Why? Why do you keep thinking you can beat Gato? You're all training for nothing and will heading to your deaths tomorrow, so why try? The young boy said, glaring at the shinobi as he snapped and slammed his hands on the table as the three of them, along with Kakashi's team, ate dinner with Tazuna, Tsunami, and Inari. The table fell silent as Naruto simply stared at Inari with sad eyes. Naruto closes his eyes and says, "It's because we can kid, you might not know this, but Gato is nothing more than a tyrant that uses his men to bring fear and drain the hope from Wave Country. That's why Raikage Sama sent us here in the first place to protect your Oji-san here so he can finish the bridge which will when it's finished bring back the hope Wave Country needs. But he has an army. He has so many men it's uncountable, and there's only 7 of you. What do you plan to do against numbers like that, kid? Listen to me here for just a minute. You're talking to trained killers who have been trained since birth to either kill, assassinate, espionage, or anything else you can think of, and you're thinking a bunch of thugs and bandits are capable of taking us out?" He said before glaring at Inari's sobbing form and saying, "Gato is nothing but a pudgy little pig that's hiding behind his money and men, and without either one he's nothing more than a fucking coward that will die tomorrow. You can say whatever you want, but just like Kaiser, we're going to be standing up to finish his work by ending Gato's rule over this country so it can bloom once again." Inari simply stared at Naruto in bewilderment when he noticed Kaiser's face appear next to Naruto's, both of them sporting the same smile that exuded bravery and strength. After saying, "There is no reason to be scared. You are strong. There is no fear. Take a step forward and protect those important to you. Lay down your life to protect those important to you. Only then will you become truly strong." Naruto got up from the table and walked to the stairs. "Now, if you will excuse me, I need some sleep. Also Inari," he said, grabbing the little boy's attention before he ascended the stairs. Nevertheless, Kushina and Mito observed his retreating back and gazed at Inari's beaming face. Together, they thought, he's really good with kids. They briefly daydreamed about their futures with little red-headed or blonde kids running around.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.